You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 445, our final breakdown of episodes 1 through 3 of the Andor series that is finally upon us. And we've got a lot to discuss, so I'm not going to sit here. I'll dispense with the pleasantries, and I'm just going to bring on our special guest tonight. It's Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. Andor's here. Waited long enough. Are you ready to talk about this thing?
Man, I feel so honored. I'm a special guest.
Special guest. You're always special, and you're always a guest. And
I'm always something of special. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, super excited. It's finally here. Happy Andor week, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the real question is,
yeah,
are we Andorites or are we Andoranians?
Oh, I used Andorites in a tweet earlier this week.
I saw that, and I was like, but I'm feeling more like an Andoranian.
Andoranians?
No, yeah. Andoranian, not an Andoranian.
Phyrexians?
Andorexia? That sounds borderline unconscionable.
No, I said Phyrexians. I was thinking like Ferrix, the
Phyrexians?
Yeah, Phyrexians.
Or do you pronounce the X with like a J? Phyrexians?
Oh, boy.
I don't know. We're Andoranians.
I'll take either one.
In my part, we're Andoranians.
Okay. Well, you're up north and I'm further south.
That is not how that works. Geography is not your strong suit. We finally found the weakness of Albert Empty.
Yeah, geography. 7 continents, folks. 7 continents. Okay. Hey, let's get into let's do some shout outs or let's do the Patreon and let's do a little bit of news. Sorry, we do have one thing that came up that we were discussing earlier in the week via text messages, and it had us scratching our heads.
Yeah, a little bit of news. This is all on the High Republic, which of course is releasing here in just the next couple of weeks. We're starting to get a lot of. We've already got the advanced copies, of course, but Claudia Gray's one-shot comic of Quest of the Jedi was delayed from October all the way until February 2023. Mm-hmm. And so this is really, really odd. And like you and I were talking about before we came on air, this is a little reminiscent of how Wave 3 started. With like all of these date changes. We've already had a change for Convergence.
Yep.
And it's concerning about whether or not this is going to be a confusing start to the beginning of phase 2 of the High Republic. Although the early feedback of Path of Deceit in particular has actually been pretty good and pretty interesting. And like we're off on the right foot. But when we start getting information like this and news like this, it's a little bit concerning. Is there anything you make from that? I know we don't have a lot to go on, but does that worry you a little bit about we're repeating wave 3, but maybe even worse this time?
It kind of does. Maybe this is just like sins of the father. I don't know.
Right.
It's with wave 3, I think we were a little bit more gracious in knowing that there were production chain issues and there was printing issues, and we had COVID and the winter snap, and I mean there's all kinds of things you could chalk up as to why things were delayed, and that kind of transcended multiple industries, right? It was not exclusive to novels and certainly not exclusive to Star Wars publishing in any way. So I think from that perspective, it was always like, okay, yeah, we totally get it, and we just kind of rolled with it. But I mean, we're so far beyond that now, and they've had the better part of 5-6 months, at least, probably a year if you think about when wave phase 1 was complete, wave 3 was complete, to the time that we are now. There's a lot of time that passed, right? Transpired. So you would think that they would have this stuff kind of like all lined up and ready to go, especially since it's the first wave of the next phase.
Right.
But who am I? I mean, these things are always not as black and white. It's probably very complicated, and I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. But it is, as long as my only concern really is if for whatever reason people now don't know when to read something, or we're getting a comic book and reading about it, and it's talking about things that are potentially going to happen, yet we've already read the books and know that they happen. That always feels weird, right? It kind of takes away the oomph from some of that stuff and the specialness of it. But
Agreed. Yeah.
beyond that, I don't know. We'll see. I guess it all depends.
Yeah. The printing challenges and things like that continue to, they're present throughout comic books in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen this with the novels too. Just whatever the logistics are of printing, whether it's the materials or the actual distribution or whatever it is that's contributing to it, we know this continues to, we're continuing to experience this.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon, unfortunately. But for usually it's like a week or a few weeks, not 4 months. And so I think that's the one that's a little odd to me. And I just don't understand it, because it seems to me like that could not be well, we're making sure it gets lined up in the right place type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
This seems to be something else. But, and again, it's not calling into question Claudia Gray or the material or anything like that. It's just kind of a concern about, I think to your point, where we really get most interested, is it going to make the story more difficult to follow? And for folks who are now wanting to jump into High Republic, is this going to be difficult to jump in? Is this going to be a difficult jumping on point where they were hoping maybe, well, I heard all these great things about, the first, the phase of High Republic, but now we get in the second phase, and now I feel like I'm lost already because they're jumping back and forth all over the place, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of consistent, coherent story, like we've seen in other material. And unfortunately, if it was a byproduct of what's going on just with supply chain and things like that, that would be unfortunate. But again, at this point, it seems like we should be able to coordinate some of this a little bit better than we are, if that was the case. But again, 4 months, that's a bit much.
Yeah, and I wonder if this is just kind of I hate to call it a standalone story, but I mean, if it stands on its own, and so delaying it 4 months is really not impactful to the overall storyline, well, then maybe that's fine, right?
That's a totally fair point. And that, I mean, again, this is a one-shot comic, and so it might very well be the case. It might just not matter where it gets dropped.
Sure.
And it's just a little bit of backstory for a character, and we go from there, and it's not a big deal. But again, is it writing on the wall type of thing? And we already know Convergence has already been pushed until, what is that, November? And we're already going to get the other ones in October. So again, we'll have to see how it plays out. We'll see what the material actually looks like to see if it matters, to see if we're just getting worked up over nothing. But again, it's unfortunate that we're experiencing these things in such quantity these days.
Yep. Well, and more on that in just a minute, because believe it or not, and hey, I'm going to throw this on you last minute here, but the Patreon topic next week on Tuesday is going to address this. So.
Oh, really? Man, I have been informed what we're talking about next week. This is great.
This is great. Just in, like hot off the press.
Well, I tell you what, hot off the press, here are the people in the chat with us tonight so far that have chimed in. We've got Jonathan, Steph, Sky, Rob, Lauren. We got a bunch of people in the background. If you're not familiar with us, if you're listening to the podcast, maybe for the first time, we would love for you to come out and visit the live streams. We're usually live on Tuesdays and Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Central Time. We're on the YouTubes, cantinacast.com/YouTube. You can subscribe, hit the little notification bell, let us know. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers, Albert. I don't know if you knew that. But that's pretty exciting. And so we would love if anybody listening would like to go and check us out visually, that'd be cool. When we do the Patreon episodes, those are live. They're not always in the vault until after the fact. And we do a little fun not Q&A, but we do a show and tell. There we go. Where we show some of the things we've collected throughout the week. Just something fun and visual to do. And we would love
I got some good stuff.
I got lots of good stuff this past week. Finally, everything just started to come in. So
okay. All right.
I'm excited about Tuesday. So anyway, come out and see us. And again, special thanks to all of our Patreon members. If you're curious about Patreon, cantinacast.com/Patreon. We have Mike, Kathy, Rob, Lauren, Dante, Risk, and Justin as part of our now part of the tribe tier. And then our Rod tier, of course, Delusions of Grandeur tier. Mr. Rod, thank you so much for being our premier Patreon member. But again, we thank and love all of you. Thank you so much for just downloading the show and listening. And we hope you like it. And we would love for you to join us in all the other ways. cantinacast.com/Discord if you'd like to come talk to us live throughout the week.
Yeah. Thanks for being here too on YouTube. I mean, and we do, I mean, it's 1,000's not a lot, but we only use it to record it so that we can, kind of interact face to face. So that's not bad, but I appreciate that.
That's actually been the really cool thing about YouTube. I was a little nervous about it when you and Mike started doing it beforehand, but I didn't realize you guys could do the interactive chats, and that's really cool to be able to incorporate that into the show. And I'm sure it probably drives some people nuts when they're listening to the podcast.
Right.
And I've seen this with other shows, right? They get
Oh,
a little,
yeah,
they're like,
for
well,
sure.
you're catering to the YouTube folks or the people that are watching. But from a creator standpoint, it's really fun to get that live feedback. So if you're curious about it, we would love for you to come out if you can and check it out for yourselves and see what you think.
Or even just drop in and say hello. Throw your name in the chat. Get your credit.
That'd be
Get
great.
out. Bounce. Whatever. It's fine. Hey,
No,
but Patreon.
You have to stay for the whole 5 hours tonight. Sorry. Once you're in,
Yeah,
you're locked. You are locked into place.
This is a lock-in kind of episode. Hey, so quickly on Tuesday, I'm calling this the state of Star Wars, and I've kind of been teasing this out last couple of episodes, mentioning this, but I think where I want to go with this, and we will get into more, more Andor specific things, but I didn't want to. I was worried if we kept pushing this off, by the time we get to Andor, November 23rd or whatever it is, we're never going to talk about this, or it's going to be so kind of,
Right.
beyond us at that point. So, but really, it's going to be talking about similar to what we just mentioned earlier, the publishing concerns. I want to look at holistically at everything that's going on with Star Wars. We can probably dip into some of the, I even have action figures on there because I see a lot of chatter and scuttlebutt about figures and the lack thereof. But talking about that, publishing, state of movie, state of film, state of comics, that whole thing. And look at you, Jonesy, doing something we just talked about, holding up to something to the camera that our podcast listeners will not know. And he's not going to tell you. Okay, so but we're going to just kind of talk about the current state of Star Wars, and I want to get into, and we may touch on this briefly tonight, but is Star Wars for kids, and who is Star Wars really for, right? So all that will be on Tuesday's Patreon episode if you're a Patreon member.
It's interesting how we keep coming back to that question, right? Who is Star Wars for, and maybe who should it be for? Or so that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, originally it was going to be called "Who is Star Wars for?" Something along those lines, and I thought, nah, it needs to be broader because we're kind of at a, I don't know, precipice, if you will, for me.
Yeah,
at least
we are at a bit of a transitional stage here about where are we going? So I agree with you. I think it's an interesting conversation.
Well, good, because you'll have to be there.
Excellent.
Okay, let's do this. Start the timer. Let's talk about the first 3 episodes of the Andor series, and I guess
what were your initial impressions, Albert? I know this was a really important series for you, so I'm really curious for you to kick us off and to give us your initial impressions of whether it's hitting the mark and how it's hitting you and individually and kind of personally, I think, as well.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely lived up to everything that I was hoping it would be. I mean, my expectations were pretty high.
Right.
Given that it was Rogue One, given that it was casting Andor, there was some, personal expectations that I wanted because, we've got a Mexican national up there on screen representing, carrying the franchise. I mean, it's been shifted around from one shoulder to the next, and now it's on his, right, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot riding on this for me personally, and I had been talking this thing up and really banking on this thing really being amazing. And I'm just gonna kind of read quickly what I posted on Twitter because I felt like that was a really good kind of encapsulation about where I was with the series, and it's brief, but it says, I'll save the majority of my thoughts for Andor on the podcast, but I absolutely love this series already on a few different levels. This is the first time I felt Star Wars television to be transformational, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. It's a catalyst in that regard in many ways. It is the result of pacing, themes, acting, directing, music, tone, subject matter, and the writing. It's the start of something new for the franchise and challenges the conventional wisdom of what Star Wars is, but in a positive way. Sure, I'm looking forward to where the series goes with this season and next, but what I'm probably more intrigued by is what doors this opens for future Star Wars projects and storytelling. Star Wars is as expansive as the galaxy itself, and Andor proves there's not only an audience for this genre, but it can be done with the best of what premium television has to offer. So that's kind of my opening salvo of where I felt like, and that was, I think I did that the day after I'd finished watching all 3 episodes. So in short, I would say I loved this series already. We'll talk about the feedback and the fair criticism. I think there's some fair criticism. I really do. But for me, I mean, it just worked on so many different levels. And the fact that we'll talk about the proverbial or the cliche gritty type atmosphere that was all there. We knew that was coming. It's just a byproduct. It's an extension of Rogue One, and I'm glad that kind of stayed true in that regard. But again, I can't underemphasize that for me, the potential that this has to open up the Star Wars universe in ways that we've always, some of us have always wanted and never thought we would get. And there were some kind of barriers, logical barriers, as to why that was probably never going to happen. And it wasn't really until Disney bought this thing that.
Can you give us a little bit of flavor about what your line of thinking is for that statement, though? Like what is it opening up for us? Maybe to be more literal about it.
So there was a time many years ago when we would joke about Star Wars, and this is like probably about circa 92, 91, somewhere around there. It was when I remember it was when the Heir to the Empire series had came out, and we were a group of friends talking about Star Wars, and we'd always said it would be really cool if they did like a Star Wars, and I mean this in all seriousness, and just stay with me here, but it'd be really cool if they did like a Star Wars medical drama, right? You're on, let's just say Starlight Beacon, and you're in the ER of Starlight Beacon, and that's the whole premise.
It's called New Jedi Order, Jedi Healer.
Well, exactly. But I'm saying like to bring that to television, right? I mean, you think about where we were then versus now. A lot of things had to happen from a technical perspective just before we could even think about these things, right? Mm-hmm. Plus, you had the barriers of Lucas and what did he want to tell? That really wasn't in scope in terms of what he was wanting to do with Star Wars. And on top of that, the audience, the reach of Star Wars is so massive now. And I truly believe, and this is going to sound maybe a little bit controversial, but Star Wars is for everyone, but not all of Star Wars is for everyone.
Right.
So think about that, right?
That makes sense.
I think we're at that point now, and I'm not saying let's entertain gore. I'm not saying let's entertain gratuitous sex and violence. That's not at all what I'm talking about. But I think there are premises, themes, stories, locations, situations that we know happen in Star Wars that probably are very intriguing to a lot of people like myself, probably super boring to other people, but there's so much more Star Wars out there for everyone that doesn't want that. And we're at a very, very unique place right now. And I'm just great. What a time to be alive to see something like Andor come on screen.
Yeah. And I think, not to belabor this, I do want to get into Andor specifically, but this franchise is 45 years old.
Yeah.
45. That's older than I am alive. Barely, but it's older than I'm alive. I know, not you, because you're old. But I mean, let's just think about that. How many generations are part of 45 years? Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got really 3 or 4 core generations. And so you are appealing to very different markets. And what you said is so accurate and so true that what Star Wars is for one person is not going to be the same as another one. And what we can produce for each of those segments can be different and enjoyable for each one of them, but may not be for all of them.
Yeah.
And while we say Star Wars is for everyone, the scope of that statement is very different than producing content, right? Mm-hmm. The idea of Star Wars is for everyone is that there's an entry point for everyone. No one feels excluded from it, but it might not be your cup of tea. It might not be what you want from it, but you don't feel excluded from it by default. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the important statement to take away from a lot of that. And so I'm excited that we are exploring different areas of Star Wars and different ways of storytelling. And what's really funny about Andor is that to me, it very much feels like a 1970s like movie in some ways, right? Of the very methodical storytelling and very slow pace and a lot of slow building and stuff. And we'll talk a little bit as we get into that. But, and I think those were the things that I didn't really appreciate them until we got to episode 3. And this was a lot of what we had talked about ahead of time, was that the first 2 episodes were very much a very slow pace. Yep. And when you got into 3 and supposedly with 4 as well, you started to get that payoff. And I finally understood what they meant by the time we got to the very end of episode 3. Now, whether you like it or not is totally subjective, but
sure. I
totally got it and I liked it. I liked where we went with it. And the more I reflected on it, and while the first 2 episodes might not be repeat viewing from that respect, it totally made me appreciate what we got in episodes 1 and 2 that much more with what we got when we got to episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and we'll talk through more of that as we get through. I don't want to belabor it, but anyway, yeah. So I appreciate your kind of where you're coming from and sharing all that with us, because I think that's a really important baseline to establish, of where we're going into it at, both from personal aspect, but also what we expect to get out of all this.
I'm going to go quickly to the VIP channel because Amanda Baldwin's with us tonight. She says, agreed.
Oh man,
there's a lot of things happening that may hit people a lot differently depending on life experience.
And that's a
exactly
fantastic point. Yeah, I mean,
exactly
coming
it.
from a longtime listener, longtime supporter, Amanda,
Yep.
Thank you for showing up, Amanda. We appreciate that. And that is a very astute statement. Yeah. It's going to hit all of us a little bit different, especially on your background.
Right. Right. I mean, because this is, I'm a fan. I think a lot of us are fans of the espionage type thrillers, right? On top of that, this had shades of, and just a little bit, I don't want to overstate the Blade Runner
oh my
parallels.
gosh. I felt like
people
this was
have overdone
watching
that a little bit too much.
I don't know about that, man. I felt like I was watching Blade Runner, like from a pacing and everything else. It very much felt like Blade Runner.
So the pacing I'll give you, the opening sequence, 100%. Like hands down, like there had to be some true inspiration that was coming from that.
Right.
Once we got off of Morala, or what was it? Oh boy, I'm still learning the names. Morlana 1.
Right.
Once we got off that planet, it felt more Rogue One-ish, Star Wars-ish kind of thing. So I'm not saying it, and that exists, right? I mean, that lifestyle or that aesthetic in Star Wars is out there. We know it's out there, even though we've never seen it. And it would be obtuse to think that it didn't exist, right? But so the aesthetic of that was really amazing. Getting back to the stuff that I really enjoyed, the acting, holy bananas! Like this is, I mean, an all-star cast from the low. I mean, there were some really breakout characters for me and breakout performances that I was not expecting. Completely floored me. The directing, Toby Haynes did a masterful job. I mean, it was perfectly directed in my opinion, the first two, but when we get to that last sequence in that third episode with the music crescendoing and building up, and I mean, it was just, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I put this up there with the best of what premium television has to offer, which is, not to take anything away from like Mando or Obi-Wan, Book of Boba Fett, any of the stuff that's come before, but this is just a different breed. It's a different class. We saw that. We felt it coming in with the trailers and the previews that we saw, and it manifested in these first 3 episodes in that way.
Absolutely.
And then 2 last things, and I'll turn it over to you to kind of get your thoughts too. But the camera work I thought was really good. I'm always skeptical or a little, I don't know, a little hesitant when I see the Steadicam in use.
Yeah.
But I think it works really well for this genre.
Wait,
right?
Steadicam or the shaky cam?
Well, it's supposed to be a Steadicam.
Okay.
Depending on how much they move, then you get shaky cam. And I think that's where people were complaining about some of the stuff that we saw in Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little too shaky. It wasn't steady enough. But it is a Steadicam, right? It's not sitting on, some kind of a, what do they call those things? They're not tripods, but it's not fixated or anything, right?
Right.
So I thought the camera work was really good. The writing I thought was brilliant. It bordered on, making the mundane interesting to making the exceptionally well. And then the music I thought was just great. I really enjoyed the music. There was one moment where I was like, whoa, what's going on? And I have it in the show notes when he starts hitting the hi-hats and the snares, and at the end of episode 2, but we'll come back to it in a little bit because it was just a little off-putting. But beyond that, I would say everything else. I mean, it just worked on all levels for me. But I've talked enough. Jonesy, what did you think? Initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, let's go back to what we talked about last episode of what makes this show successful and what makes it fail. And we had one of the 2 perspectives I came with is it has to get the seedier side of Star Wars to make it right. And if it's going to fail, it's going to be the political side of it. And it found the right balance. I mean, it hit all the notes of being the seedy side, of questionable morality, of doing what has to be done, of making poor decisions, of difficult decision making, more adult themes. I think it hit all of those things really well. And on the political side, while we haven't got the Mon Mothma side yet, we definitely still get the political, feeling from it. CORSEC, right? The corporate security and the corporate planet and things like that. The corporate vicinity in the city of how that works, how the Empire's extension works within the local security.
Right.
All of those things were really actually working pretty well. They seem a little over the top and a little, I don't know, exaggerated at times, but I think that's the point, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that, especially as we get into, when they go start looking for Andor, I don't know, the fanaticism, I guess, of some of this stuff, of how they feel, and how eager they are to, uphold law and order effectively. But I think when we talk about what did we reflect on, I think so far so good. We're doing the things. Acting, man, out of this park, no question. I mean, they're all doing an amazing job. I mean, from top to bottom, I don't think I found a weak performance in it. And again, some of it was a little over the top, but that was the point. Especially the Corset guys. I love them so much. I can't remember his name. Who's the larger guy? That's
Mosk.
Yeah, that guy I just love him to death.
He was my breakout character.
He was absolutely fantastic.
Him, but I've got a lot to say on him when we get around to him, because I think people have those. I've seen some initial discussions around the characters of Karn and him, and I think people have them wrong.
Okay.
And I could be wrong, but I am not. Okay, so let's talk about. That was a joke. Okay, let's get into.
Sorry. I mean, I do want to talk about music, though. Music was very, very different. Very, very different. And at times it was really, really good and really, really cool. And at times, like the end of episode 2, it was a little head scratching, like, okay, what now? I didn't quite know where we were going with that. And then, as we talked about a little bit earlier, it very much felt a bit like Blade Runner. Although the perspective I come with Blade Runner is more the pacing and this more of this, like a noir type of film.
Yeah, it's a slow burn. Yep. I know people have been using that a lot too.
Right, not negative. I want to make sure that's not negative, because the original Blade Runner was really slow, but in a very positive way. That I like that we got that type of feel from this right from the start.
Yeah,
but yeah, let's get into it.
So I had this in the show notes, and we don't need to spend a lot of time, but it was just cool to see B2EMO add to the opening sequence.
Yeah.
With the droids. We saw that with all the series so far. They keep adding the droids and other characters in there.
Yeah. Is he the most lovable droid now?
I mean, he's the most. He's like the
close.
most Eeyore droid.
Yeah. Oh, that's actually a really great analogy. Yeah.
He's so like, and he's emo. Like, I mean, I don't know if that was. I'm sure it was intentional that they used emo, but he's so emo and like,
No, he's just in touch with Andor's feelings. And
yeah,
I like that this is and I don't know, I want to jump ahead, but I like that this is a relationship for Andor, for Cassian. And this sets up why K2SO is an important relationship for him later on, is that he's able to bond with, he's not an unemotional character, Cassian Andor, and he's able to bond with certain, even with inanimate objects of sorts, like a droid. I mean, we could argue about whether they're, have feelings or whatever, but I like that this is setting the groundwork for there, and that he actually seems to care for him, for the droid in certain moments. And that I like that the droid calls him out on, well, that's not one lie, that's 2 lies. That was just amusing to me.
I mean, he comes across, I mean, he is essentially the family dog, right? He was with the Andors prior to Cassian coming, along, and he's just an overly sensitive family pet, and he acts away. I mean, they even scold him the way, at times they talk to him. You better not be in the corner over there, like, like this old dog that's still around. So
if you fell asleep in that room again, I'm gonna give you a what for.
What did you think about the title sequence? I thought it was pretty powerful. Similar to Rogue One, I guess, in that regard. Like, it was so different,
It was very 2001, A Space Odyssey.
That's what I love the most about it. I was going to say the same thing, but yeah.
Music and all, right? I mean, just the way that it kind of tilted and it's very type of thing.
Yeah.
It was an awful representation of it, but
yeah, it's close enough. We got it.
Yeah, you got what I mean. I kind of
what about the text? Did it bother you at all? I mean, because we have the, not only did we get a translation later down in the show,
Hmm.
one of the episodes, but then we also had them using, similar to Rogue One, giving us the names of where they were.
Yeah.
But we also got the
Yeah, BBY5.
yeah, and I'm thinking like if I'm the average Joe, like I don't know that we've ever seen the date.
No, this is the first time on screen we've seen BBY.
Yeah, so like people are looking at that going, what the heck does BBY even mean, right? I don't
Yeah.
think we need to explain it to our listeners.
Well, I mean, I
But
get it though. I think it's important to establish where we are. I think the part that was confusing is that when we went back in time to the flashbacks, which I know we're going to talk
Mhm.
about here in a minute, it didn't do the same. So what I don't necessarily understand is and maybe they just give a lot of credit to the audience of saying the audience will figure this out, and we have an intelligent audience. That's what I'm going to go with. Yeah, but
Mm.
it was interesting that we got it up front, and I think that was important to establish up front because while people might not know what BBY necessarily stands for, I think it's important to establish where we are in the timeline. And if you were to ask that question or you were to look it up, it would be immediately apparent where we're at and where the galaxy is at in that moment of time. So I think it was really important to have that. And I like the connectedness to Rogue One that we
Yes.
have with with the systems on screen. I think that was really important to establish and help you feel like there's a connected tissue with Rogue One specifically.
So we open up on Morlana 1. It's the Preox Morlana Corporate Zone BBY 5 is the full what we see there on the text.
Right.
And we open in a brothel. I mean, Cassie Andor is heading that way. In the show notes, it literally says, "Well, we got the sex out of the way,"
Right.
because we were kind of talking that this might get into some of that stuff. But again, it's nothing. I think they did it tastefully. Even like the violence. Like violence was on the same level as Rogue One and what we saw there, without it being. I mean, it was shocking, but not explicit or in that way. So, and that's good. I think that is Star Wars. I think you can still tell these more mature stories and have these more mature moments without really getting graphic in a lot of ways.
Sure. I mean, let's be honest. This is what happens when people, this isn't uncommon. This happens in our real life day over day, and we make light of it sometimes, or we might make jokes at people's expenses, but this is real. This is what happens, especially with young women in particular. They go and they find work with what they feel like they can do, and they end up in these situations. And so that Andor is exploring every option to find out where his sister went and where his sister is. He's looking at no stone unturned kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, sometimes that leads you to places that you hope you don't find them there. But this is one of those places that apparently, there potentially was a sighting of her there in particular. So
Yeah, and they're kind of teasing at a few things here too, because they they mentioned Canary. They start name dropping and giving us
setting
clues
that up
that
a little
they'll
bit.
expand upon a little bit later. But
right.
they mentioned Canary as a mid-rim planet. Later on we learned that this whole thing was wiped out. Whatever that means. I'm sure we'll get to that at some point.
Yeah, we'll have to debate that one a little bit.
Yeah, and that she left months ago. So she left this brothel months ago. I think the question that I have, and at the very end of this episode, at the end of this episode of the Cantina Cast, we're going to kind of talk about like what's still left to be discovered. Like, what did we learn that we need more answers to?
Sure.
And one of the things that I have in there, just to kind of tease it up, is like, how long has he been away from her? Is it from the moment when he said bye and went on this little expedition with all the other kids? Has he not seen her since then, or have they been in contact and they had a falling out, or she ran away, and he's trying to find her yet a second time or a third time? I think all that is kind of TBD.
Right.
So, the altercation with the guards, that whole scene was very intense. I love the way it was shot.
It was
The
very
lighting
uncomfortable, wasn't it?
is very uncomfortable
Because it rings with reality.
Well, and I can tell you, so there's a couple stuff in here where they are kind of, I'm not going to say they're virtue signaling or they were hitting on real world politics, but they kind of were in some
Sure.
ways. If you listen to the subtitles, if you turn on the subtitles, there's a moment in there when they're talking about how did he get here, right? Because how did he get to this sector?
And you and I live in a place where this is a thing, right?
I can tell you, I can testify, I have been asked this question, or I've been mocked in this way. But I've been called a wetback too many times to even mention, right? It doesn't even faze me anymore. But growing up, they would ask, how did you get here? Did you swim over here? Right, swimming across
Yeah.
the border from
Did
Mexico.
you take a
up
boat?
into-
Yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever. Yeah.
exactly. But it was interesting. But you got like Cassian Andor, right? Mexican national, and the line in here is, "What if he swum over? You swim over Scrano," is what they're asking him. So that for me was like, whoa! It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like real, a real life scenario situation that I've lived personally. So to connect at that level with this show, I mean, it's like, I don't know. It was cool. It was cool in a bad way, I guess. But
Yeah, it's unfortunate but I mean, that was the part that hit me. It wasn't like, you could definitely feel it, right? They were kind of shaking him down and like before they even confronted him in the alley.
yeah,
But then when they said, did you swim over?
mm-hmm.
It was like, oh gosh. And again, so for those that
Yeah.
may not know, Albert and I live in Texas. And so we have a river that connects, that is on the border of Texas and Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we also hear about, folks from Cuba and the Florida and things like that too, of course. But this is a real thing for us down here. Like, people actually do this and for anything to get across the border. And I don't think the context was necessarily the same,
Sure.
but the meaning was absolutely there. The undertones were absolutely there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's a people in authority shaking down someone that's maybe not, he's not supposed to be there. We get that part, but at the same time, he was there in a pretty innocuous circumstances, just trying to find information out.
Yeah.
And they just didn't like how he looked, basically.
Right.
Whether he got service before they did,
Mm-hmm.
and they abused their power.
Yeah, and this begins the first of many retellings of this story. It's very interesting how this kind of progresses, right?
Right.
Verlo's death and the retelling. But I want to, somebody today in some of the comments that I saw, someone said that, well, now he's just a cold-blooded killer who's not interesting. And I just, for the life of me, I can't even fathom how someone could see Andor as not interesting given his complexity alone. Like,
Well, these are probably the same people that called, Han Solo a cold-blooded killer in Solo too.
Right.
Yeah,
that's true.
But let me
That's
ask
a fair
you,
point.
so I have a question maybe in that vein is, do you think this was the first time Cassian had killed someone?
I kind of got that impression.
It felt that way, didn't it?
I mean, at least, killed somebody because he had no other choice. Like, whether, if there was something like it.
He didn't know he killed the other guy. It was totally not intentional, right?
Right. That was not intentional.
Right.
But at that point, when he realized, holy crap, I'm going to hang for this. It's like killing a cop. I mean, you're not,
Yeah.
the chances
going in
of you
together,
getting off.
Yeah. Going in together isn't going to save you for anything.
It's going to save the officer.
Right. Because he
right?
could turn on you in a heartbeat. You don't,
Sure.
you don't have that confidence, that faith. Why would you?
Right. They're going to side with him before they side with you. Right. I mean, this is, and I'm not saying this is how I feel or anything. I'm just saying this is what's probably going through Cassian Andor's mind.
Right.
And so at that point, he felt like, look, the only way I have out of this is to kill this guy and get out of here and I'll figure out the rest later and how do I get off planet and lay low and all that. But yeah, to answer your question, I think this was the first time he killed somebody, I guess, in cold blood. Now, whether he had been in skirmishes and, self-defense and, casualties of skirmishes where, you really don't know, maybe that probably did happen, but
Right.
yeah, his look, his reaction, and then how he later reacted to all of this certainly led me to think that.
Yeah. And maybe just to back up here, just to make it perfectly clear, Albert and I have the utmost respect for law enforcement and everything that they go through and the difficult job that they have and the difficult positions they are in. And this is all within the context of the show. And so this we understand that these situations do come up, but this is also clearly bad actors at play and not necessarily what would expect or represent from what we would typically say. These are our true law enforcement people who are out there actually doing the right thing. So just to make that totally clear for everyone that these are bad actors, right? That we understand these people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Yeah. And when the irony of that is that when Karn goes to make the report and starts arguing with his superior actually tells the story.
It begins the second retelling of the story,
which is actually fairly accurate until the very, very end of it all, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like basically these guys were in a place they probably weren't supposed to be in. They can't afford. They shouldn't be doing what they're doing. They found someone who they rubbed the wrong person the wrong way.
Drinking on the clock. Yeah,
drinking on the clock. I mean, actually everything he said was actually pretty on the spot. until it came to like the very, very end of it all, right?
Right.
To where it was like, oh, no, that's exactly what happened. Like these
Yep.
guys picked the wrong fight with the wrong guy because they were, they were arrogant, basically.
Yep. And more on that when we get to the chief and that dialogue. So there's some good stuff that happens in there. So I enjoy that, and then him running off with the lights and all that again, just more of that Blade Runner kind of aesthetic going on there.
Very much, yeah.
We talked about BTMO, so we can just kind of skip over that part. But this kind of kicks off the first flashback because I think I think B walks up to him and starts saying Cassian, and it kind of it transitions into Casa, which then takes us to our very first flashback. And for the purposes of this episode, I try to keep the flashbacks separate until a little bit later when I felt like there wasn't really a whole lot going on. So I just kind of coupled some of the flashbacks. So we'll talk about them in greater length in that regard. But
yeah, they were actually pretty straightforward, to be honest with
you. Yeah. And a lot of the footage was stuff that we saw in the trailers, like
right.
But there was some more intriguing parts of it that I think we, again, going back to the questions at the very end that we'll touch on. But out of the gate, we get to see Casa, which I think is kind of cool. That's his actual real name. Cassian, probably a play on that, of course. And then we don't ever hear her name. I need to go back and listen to him speak, though, the younger Cassian Andor Casa's talking. But Carrie is the sister, and that's what she's listed in the credits.
Right.
Yeah. So that's her name if you weren't there. But so I want to pull the Band-Aid off on this one. We've got a bunch of kids with no adults living on this planet, and it feels very Lord of the Flies, where they've kind of all come together. They're kind of living in these primitive ways, and they've probably made their own rules, and they've got a kind of de facto leader who's usually the oldest kid, and she seems to be kind of the leader calling the shots and that sort of thing. But any thoughts? Do you want to speculate at all? I guess in where the heck the adults are and how did they get to where they are?
Yeah, I mean, later on we learned that there was an Imperial accident in the mine that killed everybody, or at least from their perspective killed everyone, but clearly it didn't. And we see this when Cassian goes up to the edge of the mining area. You see the wreckage and the dilapidation of some of the tools and everything that are in the old mine when he's overlooking this crevasse, basically, right? And so I think it's very reasonable that maybe something did happen in all of that caused that. I think there's a little bit of question because the ship that crashed has this yellowish green smoke coming from it, and then clearly there's some of that evidence after it crashes, and the people who are out there with the CIS logos and everything have a green yellowish type of tint to their skin.
Face.
Yeah. So I mean, something clearly has happened, but it seems like there's some amount of truth to what happened in the mine. But for all of them to be gone is highly questionable to me, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's almost like maybe they were taken somewhere else. And it makes me think about, some of the things we've got in the trailer about the Imperial facility where Cassian is trying to, it's the clean facility where they're all wearing whites.
Oh, yeah.
And he's getting people out. Like, there's a part of me that thinks maybe there's some connection between those two things. And that might be a bit of a stretch right now, but it just seems odd to me that every single adult would be gone. But on some level, it does make sense if they were all working the same job and some disaster actually happened. But we also know the Empire is more than happy to cover up things that they don't want to circulate into the mainstream as well. Yeah. So how did you interpret all that, though?
So similar. I kind of speculated that maybe the adults were taken, like indentured workers, slave workers, right?
Oh yeah, probably.
They all got up in the morning. They all took off. They left the kids behind. But there's some. It's not bulletproof. I think there's some holes in this still. But maybe they all did go to the mine, and there was an accident, a legitimate accident, and it did wipe out all the adults, and it left these children to kind of fend for themselves.
It does seem largely abandoned. So
yeah,
there's probably some truth to it somewhere, right?
So that would be my first thought and speculation on that. The credits have the kids listed as alphas,
right?
And it could just be a placeholder. I mean, they're very specific about. I look at the credits a lot for the names and stuff, and just to see what they called them and all that. But they are very explicit and there's a meaning behind all of them. So it would be weird if they just picked Alpha out of nowhere to name the kids Alpha 1, Alpha 2, Alpha 3. I bet there's a meaning that we'll come to find out at some point if they went through that much trouble to give him a a name or some kind of nomenclature in
Right.
that regard.
I kind of interpreted that as just those were the older ones that kept, one would tug on Andor and say, "Get down," basically.
Oh, you're saying like so Alpha being in the higher up kids.
I viewed it more as a
Hierarchy.
yeah,
Gotcha.
than anything
Okay.
else. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I can see that. I definitely could see that. Um, if you've ever been down here in the Hill Country area, we've got a lot of quarries. They
Mhm.
extend all the way down to San Antonio. But when he walks up to that quarry, is what it would look like to me. Like that is you can see it. That's real, folks. I mean, those things exist down here where it's just a
Yeah.
massive crater
Yeah,
that they've been
massive holes in
mining.
the ground with all these
Yeah.
steps and everything. They're real.
So the question, I think, and I venture they'll probably touch on this just a little bit, but what was the Empire mining? What were they looking for? Was it
Sure.
gas?
Yeah, metals,
Was it?
something. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be materials for the Death Star is always a thing. Could be kyber crystals. We don't know enough about ferrix to kind of make
It'd just be materials
determination.
for ships and everything too. Yeah. It
Yeah.
could be really anything. But yeah, is there some significance to it is a good question.
Right. And it could just be, again, like you just said right now, it could just be they need Durasteel, which is nothing special. It's just a material that they use for everything that's out there. So, you know, it's if you've got the Empire as big as they are, the resources have got to come from somewhere. And like you said earlier too, they're going to go and just pillage and take what they want. And if there's casualties, oh well, there's a million other planets in the galaxy. So
Right. And Kenari is a
move on to the
planet
next one.
we know nothing about too, right? So
Yeah.
this is a planet that is brand new to Star Wars.
I want to talk about the Republic ship, but we'll maybe touch on that a little bit later once we get
I thought it
more
was
of a.
it's a CIS ship.
Well,
They-
it is. It is. It's a
Yeah.
separatist ship, but
Right.
she says they're republics. They're Republic soldiers.
Yeah, that was confusing because they were all wearing CIS badges. So
Yeah. So
I was
just
confused
hold
by
that thought because I don't know what. To be honest, I have no idea what's going on there.
Oh,
But,
okay, cool. I'm glad I'm not
Yeah,
the
no, I
only
don't-
one.
Okay, so then we cut back over from that first flashback. We're back in Cassian's Batcher pad. There was that cute line in there about that's two lies, right?
Right. Yeah.
B being that literal about about.
I like that
lying.
it takes extra energy to lie though.
Yeah, right. Like he actually needs physical energy, like power, in order to lie.
Right. And Cassian's answer was, okay, we'll just take it slow and take the easy way home, basically.
Yeah. And this kind of starts setting in motion Andor trying to cover his tracks, right? He's telling the droid, look, you're going to have to lie about this stuff. And it's just one of several things that will continue to happen here
Yeah.
before it all kind of catches up with him. We get the next piece of the lie, the great lie, the retelling of things where he goes and meets up with his friend Basso.
Brasso. Yeah.
Brasso, that's what it was. Yeah, sorry, Brasso. And I think before we kind of get into that relationship, because there's not a lot there. I mean, you get a sense that they're very close, maybe grew up together, definitely workers together. They worked together at some point. But what are they? Are they just salvagers? Are they? Because I guess that's the whole point of the planet, right? They schedule and bid. This is how I gathered this, right? They bid on ships and parts and stuff, and if they win the bid, then it comes over and they get to tear it apart and sell it and refurbish it or whatever they're doing. But these workers, there's so many of them, and they're coming out of these rolling doors. Like that was the part that was throwing me. I'm like, where the heck are they going? Is that the entrance to the salvage area?
So I viewed this as two different things. So I viewed like where Bix works as more of a salvage yard, and where I viewed Brasso as maybe more of a mining type of facility.
Mm.
And again, that would explain some of the heavier duty gloves, the bigger padding of everything else that they're wearing.
Yeah.
And again, to me, that would necessitate sealing off the mine, basically the mine shaft of sorts. If there was a disaster, it maintains it within the thing. It was kind of cool though, having the two big, circular doors though collapse. But yeah, so I viewed it somewhat as a mining type of facility, which has a connection to Kenari as well with Ferrix.
Brasso fell right, like he stepped right in line, like didn't even miss a beat with the retelling. I mean, added to it, right? Added to the retelling. So that tells you that this is not the first time he's had to do this for Andor.
Yeah. And don't ask me for money. You can't have any money.
Yeah. Well, and the last thing I'll say about this scene, the one that I chuckled at was his last comment was "make yourself useful." You think about Andor's lot, like his significance in the grand scheme of Star Wars. like he was about as useful as you could be, honestly, because he helped get the plans for the Death Star. So I thought that was just
Right.
ironic that he would make that comment.
That's funny. The part I found most amusing was when he said, "I accept your apology."
Right, even though he didn't.
He made it all up, and it was like,
He made
"I
it all
accept
up.
your
He's like,
apology." By the
yeah,
way,
you're here to apologize, and I want to accept your
Cassian.
apology.
It wasn't lost on Cassian.
All right, let's move to Morlana 1, talk about the corporate security headquarters. And this is where we're first introduced to Deputy Inspector Cyril Karn. So what are your thoughts on this guy? Because this is where I feel like
he's a tool.
Oh,
I guess.
okay, how do you really feel about him?
Right. No, he's a tool. That's
Okay,
pretty much
okay.
it. Yeah.
All right, we'll move on. No, I
He toes the corporate line. I mean, he's hook, line, and
Oh.
sinker. He's one of those. I love though that it was interesting. I know on Twitter, I think it was Holly Fright actually like pointed out that they have literally tailored his uniform
Yeah.
differently than everyone else,
mhm.
which is absolutely fantastic because it's the, oh man, what's the word? It's just the way that it kind of, it's an extension of the Empire to an extent, right? We're going to be enforced. We need to do the right thing, but we're also we have to look the part too. We have to look proper. We have to uphold our standards in addition to upholding our laws and values, right? Type of thing.
Yeah. It's
And
it's
so
about
I
it's
kinda
about
like
dressing
that.
for success.
Hey, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I like that it was a bit of a sheepishness on his part of why I might have had some light tailoring done too.
I mean, how vain, or I wouldn't say, well, maybe that's probably a good word, vain.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Yeah.
So I really enjoyed him and Mosk. Like they were the breakout characters for me. And again, everybody was phenomenal. So we're talking about everyone at the top and with little space in between them in terms of how much I really enjoyed and appreciated the performances.
Mhm.
But he and so Rob's in the chat, and Rob gave us an Aliens reference. So if you're an Aliens
Right.
fan, if you're familiar with the movie, this character reminds me of Lieutenant Gorman from Aliens, who was the lieutenant that was in charge of the Marines and, kind of screwed everything up.
Was he
Didn't
the
really.
one? Was he the one that had the alien pop out of his chest?
No, that's an alien. Aliens. He's the
Oh.
lieutenant. He was the officer that was trying to like go by the book, right?
Oh, okay.
And didn't really have a lot of experience. Didn't really connect with the other people, even though he was trying his best. It was really awkward kind of thing. It's very similar. And this is a stereotype. It's an archetype of a character that's prevalent even in everywhere, honestly.
Right.
Um,
Well, could there have been a more awkward speech when they're going to make the landing on Fenn?
well, yeah, I mean, save that because that speech
Oh
is
my
just
gosh.
like horrible. I even wrote it down because it was just hilarious and
was-
bad at the same time.
It was inspirational.
It was and the clapping was also awkward too. But he talks about uniform worthiness, right? That kind of says it all for him.
Right.
But
Yeah,
at the same
sentence
time, here's where I feel like people have got this character wrong. I think he is really a character that is about, like, he truly believes in the work that he's doing,
Right.
like to a fault, and it's why it bothers him so much because he's not wrong, right? On every level, people should be concerned that 2 officers were killed in cold blood, regardless of the circumstances, regardless if they shouldn't have been there or should not. I mean, he just believes in that kind of a black and white approach. A
Right.
wrong was done, and we need to right it. Someone needs to be brought to justice, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's more complex than that, right? It's not as black and white. It's very gray, as we find out from the chief a little bit later. But throughout all of this, until he meets Mosk, he is on an island. He is all by himself out there screaming at the top of his lungs that something needs to be done, and no one will listen to him. No one wants to follow orders. No one will give him the time. No one trusts that he's doing the right thing half the time. His decisions are wrong, et cetera, et cetera. But when Moss comes in, I mean, bam, that's like, they are like BFFs for life because he finally found somebody that gets it and understands it. Right? And so they just kind of feed into each other at that point.
More fanatical than he is, or at least as much as.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, right. Company men, if you will.
Company. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So, but we get this, Chief Hine is his name. He calls it a regrettable misadventure is his words.
Pretty
that
accurate,
he
actually.
Yeah. But they're all part of this. He talks about, there was something, he drops a little line and a little bit later, the chief does, about the Imperial Regional Command Review. And it's just there's things like this that are brought up in the series that I wonder if they're going to tap into a little bit. I don't know that they'll explore this, but it does kind of give you a sense of the relationship and the way I interpret it is, and I kind of want to get your thoughts because we've not had a chance to talk about this one.
Right.
These guys feel like they are the contracted security forces by the Empire, right? In my head, the Empire has gotten so big that at some point you can't just recruit everybody, even through a draft of sorts. You know what I mean? In scripted soldiers, you can't do it. There's just too many people out there. So, there's money to be made by companies like this who can align with the Empire and say, look, we'll be the corporate security for these particular sectors, and you guys just pay us a fat check, and we'll make sure that no one stays out or gets out of line, and everything's nice and quiet, et cetera, et cetera. This is going to bode well for both Mosk and for Karn because, I mean, you've got later on, you've got the ISB coming in, and I guarantee you that ISB character, I think, what was her name? Mira?
Yeah, Deidre Mira.
Deidre Mira is her name? Okay.
Yeah, Mira.
Or is that the actress?
No,
crap.
Denise Goff. Yeah, Denise Goff is the actress. But
Okay.
yeah, Deidre, I think it's Deidre Mira.
So when she comes in, though, like, I feel like she's going to see these two guys and go like, wow, these guys have Empire written all over them. Like, they're prime material for officers in the Empire. And I think we had speculated that he's probably going to be the foil to Andor, right, in this series, maybe even in season 2, almost kind of like a
like a Callus, basically.
yeah, like an Agent Callus kind of thing, But what are your thoughts on the relationship of the corporate sector and, are these guys, a for-profit working for the Empire? Are they an extension of the Empire? What is that relationship like?
Yeah, there's a couple things. I think back to A New Hope. The regional governors will help keep the people in line, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's an extension of this. This is exactly what you're talking about. Of you have the Empire is the enforcement, or they're not the enforcement. They're the rulers, but they have to rely. They don't have the capability to enforce except from a mass troop type of perspective. But they can't actually do local enforcement from a local policing type of thing. So they rely on these local entities in order to pick that up. But the problem is and this is where you get kind of the bureaucracy of it all too, right? And that's where we're seeing what Chief Hines in this particular case, is that there are some who buy into what the Empire is saying, but there's others like, yeah, well, it's just another entity that's, we're just another paycheck. It's just another relationship we have to manage. We have to go check the thing. And like he said, the takeaway from all of this is that we have to make sure we enact brevity, and we want them out of our business. Let us take care of things. As long as we're good enough, type of thing. It's like Mike editing the show. It was like, it's that type of mentality though, right? Of that this is what we can do, and this is what we're willing to do, or at least what that person in power is willing to do.
Right.
And then they will actually abuse the bureaucracy of the Empire to an extent as well. But it's the other way around too. The bureaucracy of the Empire is unable to really enforce and do anything boots on the ground wise either with these, with anything that starts to happen, when pockets start fermenting.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also the profitability of all of this too for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a shell game too. Yeah. It's a money game.
And if they're reporting that things just keep getting out of hand, the Empire is going to lose confidence in them.
Well, they're going to have a stronger presence too, right? I mean, they
True,
want them out of their business.
they probably could. Yeah, they could do that.
They don't want troops down there. Like, no, we're improving. Things are fine.
Right.
Locals are in order. No worries. Just keep the check flowing in. Let us regulate ourselves.
Right. And that's where Chief Hines was coming from. It's like, look, you don't want to go in there and start talking about everything that went horrible. You just want to go in there and say everything's great. Where's my next paycheck?
Right.
We've got it.
But it's interesting when Karn goes to the broader group, right, and they start to tell him, you don't know how things work on Ferrix. You don't know how these people operate. There's going to be resistance, like what's his name says, right? The other Bosk. Yeah, there you go. You're going to get those types of that type of pushback. They don't understand what they're walking into at the same time. And I think that's part of it, though, as well, is that they don't really quite know what is going on around them because they've got their head in the sand of sorts.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's more on them as we a little bit later, but let's cut over now to the I guess our introduction to Bix and Tim, in this kind of, I'm guessing
Two
it's
M's, not one.
well, hey, you know what? So, spoiler alert, I'm going to post something tomorrow on Twitter, I think, if I get the time. And it's going to be a list of all the characters in this series. And you should see how many character names are double consonants or double vowels.
That's
It's
important.
excessive. I don't know what Gilroy has with adding, like, repeating characters in names, but go look at the credits. There's a crap ton of them. So,
Fun story. I have a character in World of Warcraft. Her name is Sekili. It's Sekiili. Just saying.
well, there you go. You and Tony Gilroy, I mean, just like mind meld. You guys are the same kind of person. You just got longer, nicer hair.
Wrong franchise, brother.
No. Okay. Well, thanks. I'm derailed now. What were we talking about? Oh, yeah. So Bix and Tim. So not that it matters, but it wouldn't be a Cantina Cast episode if we didn't talk about this and try to figure it all out. What
Sure.
the heck do they do? Like, I don't understand. Are they?
They're scrappers basically, but they're like reputable scrappers.
Okay.
So but yeah, it's like a chop shop, but it sounds like a legal, not illegal, but legal chop shop. People bring in, they sell their vehicles, and they pull the parts out, and they refurbish them for other purposes.
Okay, but then there was also the bidding piece of it later on. Andor talks about
so like an
taking
auction type of thing.
skimming off the top.
Oh well, so I think that's again we may have to differentiate between Bix's day job and her.
Okay, so she's got a
what's the
side
right
hustle here where she's doing stuff on
Yes.
the down low
It
to make
sounds
extra
like it.
money.
One, I think that's that's directly attributable to Luthen as well. So she's definitely selling parts and stuff on the black market, if you will, and that she's taking a little bit off the top from. But I differentiated them a bit, although that might not be completely accurate. There might be some overlap there, but that's how I decided they were apart.
Yeah. No, that's kind of how I got it. There was some other stuff that was going on with like the deposit. You know, he's confronted by two characters. Cassian Andor tells him, he's asking, "Hey, where's the money?" And he's like, "Oh, it's in play." So like he's taking money down as deposits and doing what? Is he bidding on things? It's not clear to me exactly what's going. And then on top of that,
I don't think Andor did anything, to be honest with you. He's just hustling. There's
Okay,
no side
well,
hustle. He's just straight up hustling.
he owes a lot of people money. We know
He
that.
does. Yeah, we get a bit of a we get the impression that Cassian's a bit of a loser. Effectively.
Not had the greatest run. Yeah,
No,
I would agree.
He's wearing thin with all of his contacts. He's not on the up and up. He's definitely in the red for a lot of people. And
But what he has is Ferris Bueller charisma, right? That's why everybody, it's kind of like, oh, we'll give him another shot. I mean, people are kind of getting fed up with it, right? If he's extended his stay in that regard,
but as B tells us via Marva or Marva via B,
yeah,
he's not gonna be able to talk his way out of this stuff here pretty soon.
Exactly.
Because he's running out of favors.
I don't know if we'll ever get. I think we are. I think it's inevitable that we get into the relationship between Bix and Luthen, because at the way this ends is, they're both still around, and there's nothing to. I mean, there's no reason to believe that she wouldn't be able to contact. I mean, she's going to be able to find Andor again, right? She's contacted Luthen already. She knows how to do it, unless she's imprisoned, which is a whole nother story. But I wonder if they're going to get into that relationship and how they kind of
she's free. Yeah, she's free right now. Yeah.
And then of course we should mention that Tim and Bix are in a relationship, a working relationship with benefits. Well, at least in this episode they
Spoiler
were.
alert. Hey, did we warn people we're going to get into spoilers?
Yeah. Poor Tim. He was just trying to save his girl.
Yeah, well.
Okay, we get into the second flashback, and this is where they're kind of doing a recon prep, right? They're getting ready to go out and do, the expedition and try to figure out what happened to the ship and I don't know, whatever they had planned, right?
Yeah, Cassian's got a bit of a crush on the Alpha.
You think so?
Oh yeah, he was looking at her with googly eyes.
Hungry eyes?
Oh, well, no, I think he was a little young for hungry eyes.
Oh.
But definitely googly eyes.
Googly eyes. Okay.
He had feelings stirring up with him he couldn't understand.
So more like Aria Speedwagon, can't fight this feeling.
Don't do this to me. Not tonight.
I got a question for you that's relevant.
That's relevant.
That's relevant. The they used three fingers to mark their wrists with the black. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Any thoughts? Any significance?
I don't know what that means. Did you have an idea?
No.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on. No, it was. I mean, they showed it several times, so
Yeah.
I would imagine there's got to be some significance. And then I think, well, now
I mean,
he's left.
it seemed like it was war paint type of thing, right? This is
Sure.
the adventurers going out to hunt effectively. Like
Yeah.
their
No, I
elders
get
would have.
that. I get
Yeah.
that. But usually, markings, there's significance to markings, right? With
Sure.
with Native Americans and
But we weren't
other
given
cultures
any-
as well.
We weren't given any context, though, unfortunately.
No, I know. I was just, I don't know. I'm going to spend some more thought and time on it. Those types of things happen in Star Wars, and I get hung up on them, and I lose sleep.
I
you
mean,
know?
and there very well be something interesting connection wise to it, to the story. I don't know that it has much connection to it, but if you find something, please let us know.
Or if you got a good theory.
No, I'm gonna wait for you to do the research.
To the chat quickly, David Lozano says the actor that played Tim played a rebel pilot in the sequel trilogy.
He did look familiar, though.
He did look familiar. He's got that kind of that chin that's recognizable. Amanda says, "Rest in peace, Tim." It's almost like "Rest in peace, Wade."
Yep, we barely knew you.
Barely, yeah. He said, and then Steph says, and then painted his face just like hers. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of,
Cassian did.
yeah, and I would expect that, right? This is probably his first time.
Yeah,
They're not explaining things. So he's just going to fall in line and look around like, oh, that's what I do. Okay, I put one here, and then
Yeah, he was
I
very
put
much
three
a
markings here.
follower, and this one definitely seemed like it was his first hunt, effectively.
I like the nonverbal dialogue, the nonverbal.
Yeah, what'd you think about that?
communication.
There was no subtitles or anything for the
Oh, I had
our
no problem with
language.
it.
You
No,
like,
I had no problem
did
with
you
it. And
like
I
that
can-
though?
No, I don't mind it, and I can tell you right now, there's people up in arms about this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so what about the Ewoks? What about the Jawas? What about a number of other character species out there that spoke and we didn't get subtitles for? I think if you just use your freaking brain, you can kind of see what's going on. In lieu of that,
Tell us how you really feel.
in lieu of that, I would say, I think the the differentiating factor is that these are humans, right? Or humanoids, or humans,
Mhm.
really. Okay, right. Whereas like Jawas and Ewoks, they're not. And so I'm not defending it because I think you're just being dumb and whiny about Star Wars because that's what you do. You know who I'm talking about? Yeah, right there. But yeah, I mean, the nonverbal language was just fine. And what I enjoyed about it was, Cassian comes over and the older boy's like, no, he's too young. And then
Right.
the leader speaks up and is like, no, his time has come, kind of thing, right? Let him in. He can be a part of it now. It's fine. And all that stuff is there. Just think about it. You don't need to be spoon fed this stuff all day long. Yeah, now I'm really upset. Okay, so was that the end of that? Was all we got in that little sequence, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, so we go back to what I'm calling the map room on Morlana 1. I don't know of a better way to say this, but this was a really cool, neat little scene because we learned that Andor snuck through some of the security checks when he was making his way to Morlana from Ferrix, right?
Yeah, they're all in the Morlana system, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Which made it interesting when the Corset group was in hyperspace. Like, why would they need to be in hyperspace? But we'll ignore that for now.
It's expeditiousness. The faster they can get there, the better.
All
Sublight
right.
speed is not as fast as light speed.
Okay.
I'm with you. I get what you're saying, though. It's not that far, but who knows? Let's see, what were we talking about? Oh, the corporate borders being unprotected, and then, you've got Karn kind of flexing his officer standing, right, and saying, look, you don't want to do this job, I'll find somebody that will, kind of thing.
It was an interesting shift. Like, we have this really strong, steadfast character in these moments early on until he gets into the real world on the ship, right, on the drop ships, and he's in front of the troops, and he's in the field where clearly he's never spent any time. And so it was really interesting seeing him feel so comfortable flexing that muscle in front of all the lackeys that he feels are subordinate to him, and then the people he knows are actually field hardened, at least in some way, at least trained.
Yeah,
And he's just totally out of his element.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's Lieutenant Gorman all over again. But
Yeah.
to bring it back to like real world, military. I come from a military family, and there's something about officers. There's a stigma around officers that they're very book smart, right? Because they went to college and they get their officer title, but they've never actually been on the front lines. They've never actually been in the trenches, so to speak, with the grunts, and so they don't know. They can't relate, and so yeah, they'll talk the talk all day long, but when the rubber hits the road and they're actually wartime type stuff, that's
Right.
when they expose themselves for being nothing more than just book smart. And not that's not what I believe. I'm just saying this is exactly what this kind of archetype is being betrayed here.
Gotcha.
Um, so if we get to what I guess would be a communications tower. I didn't really understand this, and not that it's important, but Bix has got some kind of a secret communications tower.
Yeah, it's
Those
like
two characters, I think, are going to play a bigger role than I expected initially, and I forget their names. It's the one that's got the
clearly they're
Adidas hoodie on,
important.
and the no, I don't believe that. I making a joke. So people were pissed about the Adidas looking jersey or hoodie.
Right. Yeah.
But I think one is Salomon is his name or something like that. Salmon.
Yeah.
But
Something
either
like
way,
that.
they seem to be friends of Bix and Andor. She
Yeah,
goes and
they've
makes
got
this call.
yeah, they've got connections somehow. They know what she's wanting, and against this the Star Wars version of a Morse code, effectively
Yeah.
up in the towers. Actually, a pretty good place to hide it.
Yeah.
I was happy
get
it
it.
was like actually well thought out, like where it should be.
I'm wondering if we'll see this again. Either Bix is trying to contact Luthen to find out where Andor is, or
Right.
she uses it to, some way secretly to communicate when they need it most, or something along those effects.
Yeah, it's definitely a way for them to reconnect, though. Yeah.
So one of the other cooler, funnier scenes was the next one here. Or what I don't know. I called it the Intel room, but we're back on Morlana 1, and we've got these three employees. One's eating like blue ramen noodles. You've got the female character and the other male character there, but I mean, these guys are like the epitome of just the everyday person working for no one, really. At the end of the day, you know what I mean? But it's funny because he said they're doing overtime, and this whole conversation is like I've lived this conversation before. Like I've been in this conversation where we're talking about somebody's making us work overtime, and are we going to get paid for it? And someone says, "Oh no, it's his fault," and he's like, "Well, if it's not approved, then we're not getting paid for that kind of thing."
Right.
But it's just a very innocuous conversation that
Right.
I get people see this and go, man, they could have cut that out because it really doesn't do anything. But for me, it's like that's the flavor of this show, right? It's given us more insight into just the everyday kind of person and what they go through in Star Wars.
Well, it's that balance between like what is imperial and what is imperial subordinate too, right? It's again, it's this dichotomy between what we view the Empire as and who are the people actually out there doing the work,
Right.
and they're not one and the same. And that's not necessarily an excuse for the people on the ground, but it's definitely a difference between them.
Sorry, I had a cough. I'll edit that out. So the complacency really bothers Karn here again, because they're not really. I think is this the moment where she makes that comment about that you don't know what they're like, or
Yes.
you've never dealt with these people before.
Right.
And for him, that's just like, it's not even a question. Like, why should that even matter? I mean, he even says so much, right? Like, what does that even matter? Or whatever that comment is that he says. But you can see his frustration growing because again, it's just more complacency. It's more people just willing to just kind of do the bare minimum, and no one really seems to care but him. And I couldn't help but think about, the comment that Andor makes a little bit later about, the Empire being kind of, what is it, fat and lazy.
Right.
They allowed him just to kind of waltz in and steal stuff and
Satisfy.
all that. And
Right.
that really is just an extension, right? It's coming down from the top. And you could even go so far as to say it starts with Palpatine, right? Luke calls Palpatine out for being overconfident. And through overconfidence, you get kind of complacent. Complacency is something that can come from overconfidence, right? You don't think things are going to happen until it bites you. So it just feels like this is all just an extension of that. Is really the point there. What did you think about this? So, and I know we get a sense of this a little bit later, but they say Ferrix has its own way of doing things. Did they mean just the fact that although they fall under the jurisdiction of the corpos, they may not listen, or is there something more to that? Like I didn't really kind of get the meaning of that fully.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't explained. I think the way I interpret it is that they seem to have their kind of own law and order and accountability that they hold one another to. And again, they have this very, and we see this later on, like, so when they all start banging the alarms, right? So they start banging all of the metal chimes and things like that, if you want to call them chimes. You see that it's very much a closed circle when push comes to shove. And so it very much, anytime there's an inquiry, everybody shuts up and everybody just closes in and says, I'm not talking to you. I don't care what you do. They're all their people, even if they don't get along. They still have this unity about them in some ways, except for the jealous boyfriend, effectively. So it's a, yeah, but I mean, that's kind of how I interpret it, is that it was just, while they may not all like each other all the time, they understand they are all part of the same community and they will all back each other up in the most part, and they'll handle things internally, and they'll do it that way, and they don't like outside interference.
Okay, no, I like that. You come after one, you come after all. They're going to take care of their own kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we've seen this in the trailers, that there's stuff out in the streets going on.
Mm-hmm.
A bit of a rebellion, if you want to call it that, but against the the riot type of gear.
Yeah,
and so maybe that's still here on Ferrix, maybe it's somewhere else, but that type of mentality, is what I kind of draw the connections to.
Yep. Oh, good answer. Okay, so back to Ferrix. There is a brief scene there with somebody named Pegla, who is kind of I guess he's running, or he's the security for a local, I'm going to call it a used car shipyard, right?
Yeah.
And we learned that Cassian took one of these ships that was for sale, and it's more, covering his tracks. He's switching out the the ID chip log, so that people can't trace, if they come around and find that ship, it's going to look like it's never, there's no log as to where it was the night before.
Yeah, and that's what wasn't working quite right. That probably got him detected by the security bureau.
I didn't put that two and two together. So
yeah, he made a comment to Pegla that he didn't like how it was working, and that's how they tracked him, because it was kind of a weird signal. That's what popped him out to the person running the monitor.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. We get a quick flashback again. This is where the kids are heading out, and again, without the dialogue, I mean, to me, he clearly turns around to her when Kiri's like, "Don't leave," and he tells her, "I'll be back soon." Right. And he turns and heads off with the older kids.
And possibly the last time you've seen her, yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's sad, isn't it? Possibly. Okay, that's kind of how episode 1 ends. Here's the only thing that I would
20
say.
minutes in, and we're on to episode 2 now.
Well, the other ones will go a little bit faster, because this was one of the longer ones. And we've got a lot of the, who are they kind of stuff out of the way. Mm-hmm. I want to quickly just say, I guess, maybe it wasn't all roses, and this is such a minor critique, but I have a question about the way, and I think I texted you on this one. It's the way this first episode ended, and we talked about this in the last episode as well. In that, are we getting these 3 episodes because it was poor planning? Are we getting these 3 episodes because it makes more sense in hindsight now, right? Someone had a revelation that this was how it needed to go, an epiphany. Yeah. But the way episode 1 would have ended, let's say they release these week by week, right? I don't know that this would have, like, the way this episode ended, I mean, it was great. Everything about it was awesome, but it was just a weird part for me. Like, it felt disjointed about where episode 1 ended. And I don't know, like, I was trying to think, okay, well, what came after this, or what came before it? Was there a more natural place to break? And maybe there wasn't. Maybe Gilroy looked at this and said, well, this is about as good as I got right now, because either it's going to be way too short or it's going to be way too long. So I'm going to break it here. But it just felt weird that had they broke it at the end of that first episode, and then we had to wait a week, I think the negative feedback would have been just crazy through the roof, because I don't know. That's my thoughts. That's how I feel. But what did you think?
Well, and I kind of felt that way. Even if we would have ended it right after 2 episodes and then had to wait for a 3rd week, I think we would have had a very different feeling of uncomfortableness about where this was going, right?
Yeah.
But I agree with you to an extent. I think it was clear that this first episode was definitely going to roll into another one. I think the intent of releasing 2 to start was probably always there, because this seems to be what they tend to do at the very least, especially given this is a longer series. Now, having said that, though, it does not, it was kind of an abrupt, I don't want to call it abrupt. I think it was a natural conclusion to the episode. But did it leave you wanting more? Did it leave you eager for the next episode? You and I might be on the same page. Like, no, not really. But we knew there was something great coming next. So we just kept watching type of thing. But if you were to get this by itself, standalone, what would have kept you coming back for more? Was there enough there? And that's so subjective. I mean, for you and I definitely would have watched every episode. But
we would have watched it no matter what, because it's Andor and Star Wars. Yeah.
Right. But if you're a casual viewer, knowing you didn't have another hour plus of content to watch and see where it went, was it enough to really get you totally in and see where it was going? And the answer is probably no. I mean, these first 2 episodes, they were very, very slow and methodical. They were setting up a lot of different things. And when you get to episode 3, those all kind of fit together and make a little more sense. But on their own, I could see where some people might have a harder time with it.
Well, and I forget who was it that said it in the chat last time. I think it might have been JW that said, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? We've got all 3. We know the story. Yeah. What that 3rd episode does for the first 2 is just brilliant, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So you kind of, I mean, I can see where they logically came to the conclusion of, okay, let's just release all 3 because this is a better story to tell in one sitting. But why did we get to that, 0 hour, 11th hour, 30 days prior to, and get the push out? And it's just a mystery to me. It doesn't, it's still an incredible show. Okay. Episode 2 opens up with another flashback. Just more of the kids on their journey. This is where we get that, the site of the quarry, the mining, the old equipment that's there, the abandoned stuff. And it just looks like it's been stripped to the bone, really, at the end of the day. So,
and again, I think the one takeaway is how Andor looks at it, like of what is it that he sees? What does it recall for him? And we don't have that context quite yet. But again, we know there's no parent, there's no adults. Where are his true biological parents? Yeah. Presumably they may have worked in that mine, but what happened and what is the emotional significance of it? And we'll have to wait. We talked a lot bit about, I've been in this fight since since I was 6 years old, and we thought we were going to go back that far in time. We're not. Mm-hmm. It doesn't appear that we're going to go back that far, because he appears to be, probably early adolescence. I think if maybe we called it that, 12, 13 years old, 14 years old, something like that. Mm-hmm. So his sister is probably closer to that age, but definitely not Cassian. And so we're going to have to understand a little better what happened and how long they were on their own for, to fit that context between what happened at the mine and why he believes that he's been in this fight since he was so young.
Right.
And we know it was an Imperial accident. That's what we found out later on with Rayo.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about a very serious topic here.
Bell tower.
This guy in the bell tower, he takes his job way too serious. Like, he is so pumped up
and
to ring that bell.
The actor's last name is Bell too. It's so perfect.
He's making grunting noises, and this is when we saw the trailer, you remember we speculated on this, and we got into
I told you what it was going to be. I told you it was nothing more than an alarm system. He's Big Ben,
I was
man.
I know, I was off the deep end thinking about what is this, the wars of the drums of war, and is it a signal for the British are coming kind of thing? And no, it's just a dude who works in the bell tower and gets up in the morning and gets up in the afternoon, and he's stoked, dude.
Start the day, end the day, and takes his job very seriously.
He's making all these grunty noises.
I love it. I love the sharp motions too. He takes it very seriously, man.
Again, why not have a droid or droid do this, or have it electronic? It
is a long-standing tradition, Albert.
Okay, that's what it is. It's got to be.
Been passed
there's
on
no other explanation.
Passed on through generations of bell grapplers or time grapplers. It's a badge of honor to be appointed to that position, to have that sense of time. So get on board now.
All right. Ship up or ship out.
That's right.
He's good at it, says Lauren. Man, it says he is amazing. So steampunk.
There you go.
He did look steampunk with his little
As well, you got to
earmuffs,
protect your
headphones.
ears, man. That piece of metal there, whether it's Beskar or whatever it is, man, that's gonna be loud. And you're
He
banging
has
on that
one
thing.
job. He has one job. And when everybody was banging on their little ghetto stuff, how come he didn't climb up that bell tower and
Whoa.
start ringing it?
Hey, scope of your position, know your place, know your
Oh,
role,
my goodness.
do your job.
My goodness.
He's gonna be recruited by the Empire pretty soon.
You've spoken like a true corporate man.
Yeah. Now you're starting to sound like a separatist. I'm gonna get that quote wrong every time.
Yep. Okay. So we get back to the shop. And this is where Bix is kind of sneaking around. You know, she's hearing back from Luthen. Of course, Tim's taking this all wrong. I mean, he's trying to put two and two together. And maybe just quickly, I've seen other people comment on the fact that they had a relationship prior to, and they may have talked about this in the press stuff leading up to the show. I don't know. I didn't catch it if it did, and it makes sense. But
With
you do
Bix
get a
and
sense
Andor?
that they did have a relationship prior to this.
With Bix and Andor?
Bix and Andor, yeah.
Yeah,
What do you think about that?
It seems like they probably did. I mean, there's history at the very least.
Right.
And so, and again, I think for Tim to be jealous, I mean, clearly she has a soft spot for him, and they're very close. And so,
They get very close a little bit later. Not Tim and Bix. I mean, like Andor and like that first scene when Andor and Bix are together, and he's trying to get.
Well, Tim gets really close with Bix.
Oh yeah, I know, I get that.
I mean, we got the first sign of underwear in Star Wars.
I know. My goodness, there were people complaining
and
that
socks.
And yeah, I saw that too. My goodness, people. But there's a scene there when they got like when that very first scene when he comes back and tells her like I need you to call Luthen, like he's in her personal space, and she doesn't flinch. So either they have history or she's comfortable with it, even though she can't acknowledge it, right? And then later on when they're in the bar,
she taps him on pat him on the shoulder, on the chest at one point, and then she pushes his hand off of her arm. Of course, Tim doesn't see that part, but.
Yeah. Well, she breaks the friend zone barrier there. But then later on in the bar,
I thought
cantina.
She enforced the friend zone barrier later on. Yeah.
Sure. In the cantina, they have that little awkward hand touch. So
yeah, but she pushes him off. She's like, "No, thanks."
No.
And now I'm lonely. I'm gonna go hook up with Tim.
You're reading it wrong.
I'm pretty sure I read it exactly as they wrote it.
Okay.
But yeah.
Let's go to the professionals because we have some in the chat. They'll chime in just 1 second. Let's see. Okay, so we talked about Tim being suspicious. The APB comes out finally, so this is starting to circulate now from Morlana 1 that there's a Canary male. And then we finally cut over to Shay's Andor, right? So Marva's little pad, and I assume Cassian does live here. He's got a room here.
Yeah, he lives.
And in addition to his little Wally ship that he lives in out in the salvage scrap yards. But let's talk about Marva. What did you think about her as a character? And then the performance by Fiona Shaw.
Performance was amazing. It was great. Not really sure what to expect about it quite yet because we get a little more context when we get to episode 3, but we don't necessarily understand where she's at right now. I think I've read online that she's sick. I mean, she's got a cane now. She's clearly much older than she was when she, rescued Cassian. But I think from this point, I mean, the character is cool. I mean, she's not going to rat him out, but clearly her and Cassian have some. I don't know. They're not quite aligned on a lot of things, and what's really not clear to me, and especially as we get to episode 3, is like we had heard in the thing that they were more aligned with separatists, but I'm struggling to understand where that comes from. And at this point, we don't have that context, especially with the ship and everything that we find out a little later on. And so I'm really kind of confused where she sits in all this. But the one thing that's clear, she cares about Andor. She cares about Cassian.
Yeah.
She adopted him. She took him in.
Mm-hmm.
But they also maybe don't quite trust each other. Who has actually shared Cassian's home world? Because that's been a secret. They've always used Fest. And so we learn a little bit more of the relationship as the series goes on. But I mean, overall, though, I mean, I like the character. I want to see what they do with her, if anything. But yeah, clearly, there's something more to her. We just don't quite know it yet.
Well, and this, the mystery of the ship the people on it. I love that aspect of it, right?
Mhm.
I think there's something there's something big going to come from that. You can't help but think that. But in the context of this conversation, we discover that his identity or his origin of Canary is a secret in itself. Like, she's been keeping this secret for so long. So why? Like, what is so special about the fact that he came from Canary and that he was a survivor of Canary, that she had to change that, his birth records, and they kept
Exactly.
this only to family members that knew the truth.
That are
I
all
don't know.
dead. Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's a
so
great point. It doesn't make sense why they would change the origin of his birth
Mhm.
when really it was a completely no one cares kind of planet.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, what's the deal there?
She makes another comment too, and again, this is probably we're reading too much into it, but she says people, the people that she's told have died, and I
Mhm.
guess you could take that as, okay, she told people that had just naturally gone and passed, right?
Yeah, they're old.
Or
Yep.
or she told people, and for whatever reason, because that got out, they died.
Oh, I
like-
just viewed it as they were old.
Yeah.
But maybe
Again, I could be reading too much into it, but that's
it wouldn't be the
I-
first time.
this whole show has been predicated on me reading too much into everything.
That's what makes it
Um,
enjoyable.
Jezzy and Samo Andor, are we ever going to get their story?
No.
No. All right, we'll move on. We get to the cantina. I get to the cantina scene.
I like your
and this
show
is-
notes. They touched hands. It's all in caps.
It does. It's all caps. As they
Great.
touch
We've brought back hand sex into Star Wars.
Yeah.
Great. We've had
Yep.
brothels, and now we're bringing back hand sex.
hand sex. Yep.
Fantastic.
But yeah, I kind of got the sense this was kind of like an old. This was an old stomping ground. Maybe when they were courting each other or when they were dating, they would come to this little cantina, because she makes that comment about haven't been here a while or whatever it was.
Yeah, he says that. Yeah.
Oh, he says that's what it was.
Yep.
But
of course, he's over there, or Tim's over in the shadows stalking.
stalker, creepo.
Hey,
No, I'm
he's
kidding.
keeping tabs on his girl.
Yep, that is called a codependent relationship, my friend.
Is that what that's called? Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And
I'm
then
making notes.
Luthen, she does tell him Luthen's on the way. And of course, this is too much for Tim to take, because not only is he insecure, but he's been drinking. Not a good combination. I've been there. And he decides to call the hotline. So he reports Cassian Andor.
That's right. He called
Sure.
Unsolved Mysteries and
Mhm.
got Robert Stack himself.
I think he can. If you or anyone you know. Okay, so we go back to the Morlana 1 intel room, and this is where, they're kind of looking at the records. They see the contradiction of, oh, well, it says that we're looking for somebody from Canary, but this guy's from Fest. But I think one of the cool things, and this is where I was talking about the flashbacks, when they're looking at his record, they say that he's had violations for insurrection, destruction of Imperial property, and assault on an Imperial soldier.
Right.
And I just wonder, now that we've seen those scenes where he's in that white space and we think he's like in prison, I wonder if those are the flashbacks. Are we going to get these flashbacks and we're going to see the insurrection, right? Is the insurrection of the prison that he's in? Does he cause an uprising because he gets caught at some point in his past, right? So they're actually calling out some of the flashback scenes that we're going to see. Destruction of Imperial property. I mean, that could be anything. Maybe it's a TIE fighter he blows up by accident or something weird, right? And then
anything,
assault on
yeah.
Imperial soldier can be anything as well. But
I hadn't considered that, actually. That's an interesting idea.
it's the only one I've had tonight.
No, you have lots of ideas.
They're just not always interesting.
I didn't say that.
No, I did. So the brothel hostess comes in, and this is kind of where it all,
Yeah, it comes together.
it comes together. Yeah, they're able to they've got the old footage of the old picture of him. They've got her as an eyewitness now. They know that the ship came from Ferric, so it all comes together. And this is like, at this point, Karn knows, okay, I've got to get a team together. I need somebody on my side, and he goes about and does it. And next part of the show note says Ferrix, Tim and Bix do it. Okay. Morlana 1.
Knock them boots.
Let's
Booty call. Whatever you wanna call it.
let's talk about my honestly, like, seriously, probably my favorite character next to Andor.
Oh,
My favorite character is Mosk.
That was your scene of the booty call or something.
No.
Okay.
Sergeant Linus Mosk.
Oh my
What
gosh.
do you?
Linus
what
is
are
a
your?
great first name.
Yeah, Linus. But give me your thoughts. I know you've already kind of talked to him a little bit, but what was your take on him?
No, he's like the quintessential, toe of the line officer, like just over eager and believes in everything that the Empire stands for, type of thing. What was his quote? Is like the only way to keep the blade sharp is to use it, right? I mean, he's like the
Yep.
epitome of keeping the locals in line with fear,
Mm-hmm.
and the only way you bring people together is to enforce, that type of mentality. And so I thought he was great. I mean, he empowers Karn in a
Right.
lot of ways to make sure that he feels it. I mean, look, Karn definitely is evolving a bit as these episodes go on, as into potentially a very qualified and quality villain, I think. And this is a character I think that it's going to get a lot better as Karn. But to have that support from Linus Mosk is a huge, huge deal. And plus, he also says the first swear word in all of Star Wars. Well, the first non-network TV primetime swear word in Star Wars. How about that?
Yeah.
We've qualified it.
Yeah, I'll talk about that here.
I know we'll talk about it. They've marvelized it.
So I agree with the assessment. I had bootlicker down as another term that I would use for him.
Did you say bootlicker?
Bootlicker, yeah, like somebody who licks the boots of their
Oh,
officers. It's another military term.
Yeah.
Huh?
But he believes it too, though. I mean, he's actually
he does. He absolutely does, and that's like you said. It was I had validation for Karn. Like this was a complete validation for him of everything that had been happening so far, and no one had given him that.
Yeah.
So for that, I mean, again, these guys are just kind of like two peas in a pod at this point. But he goes on. I mean, they're completing each other's sentences. He's saying everything Karn has said and wanted to say, but just hasn't done it. He does it much more eloquently. I mean, he speaks the Imperial corporate sector language. He uses all of the colloquialisms that really, resonate with the higher ups, right? He's got Imperial officer written all over him in every aspect.
He uses words like fomenting more than once.
Yeah, exactly.
Albert, pockets of fomenting.
So yeah, I mean, I'm eager to see these guys. I kind of want them to live, like honestly, like I'd love to see more stories of them should they live beyond this series to see, how far up in the ranks does he go before he gets choked out by Vader. But
they're the Baze and Chirrut of the Empire, basically.
Oh yeah, or a Tag and Binks maybe.
Well, or Biggs and Porkins. We can do this all day.
Yeah,
as Rob says, our Star Wars Scotty. That's kind of true.
He feeds into the main villain. Yeah, he does. He feeds him. He empowers him. Again, he validates him. He makes him feel like his cause is worthy. And his hair is too annoying, as Lauren just pointed out in the chat.
Well, we have standards around these parts.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many different places you can get a haircut on Ferrex, to be honest. So, okay, we cut back to the different flashbacks. So this is where I coupled flashback number 5 and 6. This is where the female leader approaches the wreckage. She's going at it alone. Here's where this is where, again, more mystery. And I don't know, we don't need to come up with all the answers here because we're not going to get them right anyways. But like whoever this person is, whether they're whether they're separatists or Republic or what, he shoots first and asks questions later.
Right.
And that's really odd to me because they would have to have crashed and thought they were in a hostile environment. Like, why would he open fire the way he did on clearly a young person, clearly
her back was to him, so
primitive, she's got a blowgun dart, which I didn't see. I didn't know that. That was kind of surprising.
I just thought it was a pole. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was weird the way they were holding him. I didn't. I was like, well, okay, that's kind of cool. But but the blowgun thing was really neat. I just don't. I don't know. It's just more mysteries as to why this guy just starts opening fire and shooting all of these kids, rather than not his first instinct wasn't, oh, I've crash landed and these people are here to help me, or at least try to make conversation with them or try to plead his case rather than just guns blazing. I don't know. It was just weird.
No, it was. I didn't understand it. But again, he had been poisoned. because he had been gassed by something. Clearly, his color, his skin had changed. We know there was the smoke. Disoriented, crashed. Clearly, strayed out from the ship, and saw someone approaching his ship, and maybe just got defensive about it, and took aim and shot. So, again, thinking clearly, no. Are we going to get a backstory? No. You're just gonna have to live with this mystery, Albert. I'm sorry.
No, I won't. I will.
I expect a 2,000-word essay on my desk by the morning.
You got it. The gas.
The gas.
I'm assuming
understand.
they were.
I don't
What's
understand what that was. I don't know what the gas was.
I kind of thought they were transporting the gas because it's leaking out of the ship. Like it's leaking out of the ship, right? We see it in one scene, I think only.
Well, and when it explodes, even when they're descending, you can see the gas starting to escape in the back.
No, I didn't notice that.
But yeah, you see pockets, not fomenting, but of escaping gas, like on the ground after it crashed too. Yeah.
So I don't know. Tabana gas. I don't know what Tabana gas looks like. It could be any kind of gas, but it for me it feels like they were transporting this legally, illegally. Who knows what the purpose was? It crashes. It exploded inside. They rushed to put gas masks on, and weren't they were too late because their faces their pigmentation was changed to this green color and tone. Right. That's kind of reinforced by Marva and Clem when they come on the ship, right? They came on with it, and then when what was it? B says no, the air's good. They take the masks off at that point,
right?
So all that maybe the gas made him crazy. Who knows that he would just open fire like that?
Yeah, I mean disoriented at the very least, right?
Yeah. All right, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt for now. But yeah, so the the leader gets shot. The kids all take her back to the village. I think she's dead. Like her eyes were open. It seemed like she was breathing.
Yeah.
I think she's Dunski's. But Cassian decides to stay behind, interesting enough. And I don't know the reason for that. Like I'm trying to think from my perspective, like if inside the mind of a, potentially 12, 13-year-old boy, was probably hesitant. He seemed awkward. He's not very experienced. But what
lost his
changed?
Wannabe girlfriend?
The older girl in high school. Oh man, I've been there too, dude. But what changed in him? Why did he suddenly feel compelled to go into the belly of the monster?
Yeah.
When what I would think would have been his natural reaction is fall in line with everybody else, right? Like our leader's just been killed. All these kids are screaming. I've never been in this situation before, and yet there was something that drove him to move forward. Call it the force, call it destiny, whatever it is, but it's just a weird decision for him to make at that age and his experience.
Yeah, I think of it a couple of different ways. I think one is you saw your would-be girlfriend shot down, so you get empowered a bit. Like I'm going to vengeance.
Oh, he did it for her? Oh,
well, I mean, partially. I think the other part, though, is that it's clear that Cassian wants to be, or Casa, I don't know who we're supposed to call him at this stage, but it's clear that he wants to be part of the tribe and part of this older group, right? He's ready to graduate into being a more mature and being viewed as part of the elder crowd and being as a leader of the tribe. And so I think this is one of those opportunities of, well, I'm going to avenge her and figure out what's in here by going in there and looking, and then his anger gets the best of him when he starts destroying everything around him. Like a typical adolescent boy.
Yeah.
But so I kind of viewed it in those two.
Looking at you.
Yeah, right. So I kind of viewed it in those two ways that, and probably more the latter of wanting to prove his worth and that he's worth, because he saw this guy standing up and he was kind of paralyzed with not sure what to do. I wouldn't call it fear. I think it was just uncertainty. And so he watched him gun her down. And could he have done something? Maybe, maybe not. Would it have been effective? Probably not. Because it took so many darts to actually take him down, the poison darts. Anyway, so I kind of view it in those two terms.
I like that one. I like the, there was a moment for him to kind of come of age, prove his worth. Maybe he is the run of the litter in some regards. And this was we don't know his background, and this was finally a moment for him to just face his fears and do what everyone else couldn't do. And, something along those lines. I like that.
Yeah, everyone was running away, so
he did the opposite.
He's kind of curious too. I mean, I think that's the other part, and we see this over and over a few times here. But yeah, it's something. It's somewhere in that ballpark, I think.
Rob pulling in the deep cuts. I was hoping Doctor's Nuvo Vindi from the Clone Wars was in the ship. Okay, so let's. This is our first introduction to. Well, I guess not officially. Well, I guess officially, but there's not. It's a mild introduction to Luthen.
Right.
In the credit, in the subtitles, it just says "man." Like they're trying to keep it secret at this point. But
Right.
he's coming in. He's got this bougie starship which is funny because at the very end when Cassian boards a ship, if you watch that, he's looking around like, "Holy crap! Look at this ship!" Like
Right.
in the middle of all of the what's going on, right? He's still just shocked by how exquisite this ship is in so many different ways.
Right. Well, I mean, look at the crap hole that he's, staging up in every once in a while.
Yeah.
Not the one that he flew back and forth to, to Prelox or whatever it's called, Morlani, but the other one where he crashes whenever he, can't make it home. It's a dump.
Right.
So
It's
yeah,
a dump.
this looks like the Ritz-Carlton.
Oh yeah, I mean it's clean on the inside. His what Fondor droid mod, and Fondor's come up from Battlefront 2.
Right. It's another Corellia type planet that does. Yeah, they do a lot of manufacturing of ships. Yeah.
But the way it talks is very prim, proper, optimizing landing, kind of thing. And
it is very fancy.
Yeah. So very modern, very clean looking on the inside. And in true classic Star Wars fashion, he can't land close to where he needs to be.
It was very much a Darth Maul, right? He lands on the outskirts, with the little binoculars going around, and then
it's so many instances of Star Wars where someone has to land farther away than they have to. But I get it. Rogue One did it too. So Luthen has to shuttle into town. And that's pretty much that. We'll get some more of that a little bit later. We got the first on-screen mention of Calf.
Yep. And underwear shot. Got it.
An underwear shot. Yep. That was in the next scene here. This is the morning after. And Tim's acting real weird at this point because,
he's totally creeping out watching her sleep and she's hungover. So
I didn't read it that way. I took it as like, holy crap, I've done something that I don't know is whether it was right or wrong. I hope in the end she's going to side with me and see why I did it, but I could lose her kind of thing.
Oh, you're talking about him. I was talking about her. No, she was totally drunk and she went over and.
Oh, yeah. No.
Oh,
okay.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm talking about Tim the next morning when he was staring at her. I didn't take it as a creepy thing. It's just like, I think he was just running through all of the stuff that was happening and playing out every scenario of how this was going to go and how their relationship would be impacted by knowing that he just ratted out somebody that was very close to her,
Yeah. I think he kind of had that moment the night before when she actually showed up too.
Mm-hmm.
But, like a typical male, I'm going to roll with it.
Yeah. Fleeting thought and then moved on.
I'll deal with this in the morning.
There's another quick scene, and I'm kind of jumping over some stuff because I wanted to touch on some of the bigger.
There's a lot of exposition.
But we get back to Marva, and she's kind of going through Cassian's room, Andor room. And on some levels, like I get it. Like I know you said there's kind of a rift between them, but I mean, you think about it. That's her kid. He's still living with her. She's really done nothing with his life, and they're probably not seeing eye to eye, and she's worried about him at the same time, that kind of thing. But I did like the fact that when she's going to the room, she sees the blowgun. That's what kind of gives us the next flashback which we've already talked about. But that little bantha toy that was there, I wonder if we're going to see that as something they give him, to kind of help him. I don't know, or maybe there's an origin there.
Yeah, maybe he helps Boba Fett out of Tatooine or some point. Anyway, but I think the other interesting part though is that what do we not know about Marva? Where Cassian probably learned all this stuff from someone and from somewhere. So what was their lifestyle before they settled down here on Ferrix? And I think that's the interesting part, especially when we get into episode 3 when we see, what are they out there they're scavenging for fuel cells and things like that. But what is it they're like? Whose side are they on? What are they trying to do?
Yeah.
And where does she sit now? Especially as she starts talking about, a reckoning and stuff. But surely she's not talking about the Empire. She's talking about just people rising up and protecting their own. Yeah. And so it's interesting to see how she feels about this because the way that she brought Cassian up is a huge part of all of this too. Mm-hmm. And then so he's learned all this some way, somehow. what's the story behind all of that.
One of the funnier moments comes up next where they're in that shuttle station and there's the humans arguing with that little alien guy.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I mean, I need more of them, but that whole "you're wrong," it's it's the confidence that's irritating. I'm looking it up, like it's on Google or whatever, trying to look it up.
Right.
That whole bit was really funny for me.
This is like the train station. Basically, Cassian is trying to get off world.
Yeah,
quickly and in very low amount of discretion, or a lot of discretion, I guess.
No Imperial entanglements kind of thing.
Yes.
Well, that's a trick, isn't it? We get some more background. I think we've talked about this, but he mentions Kenari as being an Imperial mining disaster. Everyone died, abandoned, and considered toxic. He says Imperial prohibition. So I think all that lines with what we were speculating.
Well, but it could be propaganda too. Like, why was it abandoned? Is that absolutely true? We know the Empire's not above, lying about some of this stuff either.
Right.
Yeah, and clearly there were people living right next door to it. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to think where they've said that about a place, and it turned out to not be true.
Mandalore.
I mean, Mandalore comes to mind now, right? Although we know that was, now that we've seen the footage.
I think like Alderaan's probably still okay too.
Right, that was just propaganda.
Right.
Alderaan's fine.
It's all Photoshop and After Effects.
So this is where we let's cut to the briefing. So they're the corporate security transport is in mid hyperspace. They're heading out to go capture Cassie and Andor, and we get that rousing speech from Linus. I think he does an amazing job like that. He's so within his element, right?
Right.
He's connecting with the soldiers. You can see it on their faces. They're laughing. They're agreeing and nodding with them, and then we get a complete divergence from the buy-in once Karn starts giving that really awkward speech. And I think the actor, what's his name?
He pinches his nose.
He does a really good job of being super awkward and
Kyle Soller.
Yeah, Kyle Soller. Yeah, of being awkward and inexperienced, showing his inexperience and showing his inability to really connect and resonate in any way.
It was very inspirational.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. There comes a time when the risk of doing nothing becomes the greatest risk of all. I can't imagine a team I'd rather share it with than all of you. That's the funniest one because he's just recruited these people. He doesn't even know these people, and yet he's trying to say things that he thinks are going to inspire and connect with them, and they're all looking at him like, we don't even know you, right?
Have you ever had to give this type of speech to staff or people in your work enviurement?
Yeah, but I've
never that just totally fell flat like this.
The only time that ever happened for me, and it's happened a couple times, honestly, but where I find it happening most is when I take over a new position. I've got a whole crew of people now that report up to me, and I got to give that first introduction speech, right?
Right.
And I'm saying, it's kind of like this. I'm saying the same kind of things, but I know I don't know these people, and yet I'm sitting here talking about how I'm trying to inspire them and make them feel like, hey, I'm just one of you, and we're gonna do this together, right? And hopefully I don't come off as this awkward, but yes, I think I've been in this position before.
And then they were like, we totally disagree with you about the time grappler, so we know you're full of it. Go back to where you came from.
Yeah.
And we also don't agree with you about Maz Kanata.
Maz Kanata, yeah. I've heard your show, dude. He says there's no room for doubt.
We've done our research.
He says there's no room for doubt on the path to success and justice, and then best of luck to us all.
Justice.
Yeah, it was good. It was good stuff. And then there's the slow clap and the awkward clap and
just clap. Well done, sir.
Well
Inspiring.
Done, sir. Inspiring. And you almost think he means it too. Like, I don't.
No, he totally doesn't, because he was like, he totally didn't know.
But you know what? He gives. It's kind of like Amanda said earlier. He gives Karn what he needs, right? He gives him what he's feeding him. That's what he needed to hear.
He supports his
giving
superior.
Him the support. Yep.
Right.
Yep. So those guys are cool. Okay, and then we get Luthen on the shuttle here, where he's talking, and there's a little old guy there who's knee deep in conversation many times over. And this is where I was like, what is going on? and this is not to spoil it, but remember we talked before we came on air, that very last question that I have in the notes?
Mm-hmm.
This is Willie.
Okay. Yep.
So who the F is Willie? I don't know. We'll find out later. Maybe, but they just seem like the only thing I could think of, like he has this whole conversation in this episode and in the next episode as well. He's so like talking about, getting screwed over and the money, and maybe he's just a penny pincher and all that, or a shrewd businessman. But then I thought, well, maybe he's the guy that owns the shop that Bix and Tim work at, because he talks about he's in the business of propulsion.
Right.
And I think that's what they were working on, right? They were working on like propulsion engines and refurbishing those and selling them.
Yeah, he does propulsion, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, so I mean, behind the scenes type stuff. So Willie, like the actor who plays Willie, and Stellan Skarsgård have been in movies before together.
Oh, have they? Okay.
Yeah, there's 3 of them in Andor that have been. I forgot what the name of the movie was. It's several years old, of course, but they were all in a movie together. So that's kind of the connection there.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel better. I think he has a great line though at the very end, which is a good segue. But it says, if you can't find it here, it's not worth finding, right? And they cut immediately to Andor.
Right.
So, that's not lost on me. This is where we get into and the notes I have, whoa, easy on the snare and the hi-hats, because it's just like the music is
It's just out of
so
nowhere.
different. So different. I think I'm fine with it. But yeah, I mean, he was just like, it was different. So different.
It was a little out of place. I think
It
it's
felt out
fair.
of place. I'm going to be fair. I'm going to be honest.
And I think with the music in general, I think with the series, it's been good. I've actually liked it. I like that it's a little bit different. But there are moments in there like, I don't know how well this fits, like at all. And I'm not sure where this is going. And the styles that the composer's using throughout all of it is just so diverse. Like throughout.
It is. It really is.
Even a singular episode, like the consistency of it is a little jarring at times because it just transitions to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a great example of that, where all of a sudden it goes to this, heavy, more modern drum sound, like actual drum set, rather than, something like kettle drums or something, something a timpani, that type of thing, more symphonic type of experience.
Yeah.
And so, and there's several instances within these 3 episodes where the tone just changes and shifts considerably with the music. And so it'll be interesting to see where this goes, because I like it. It's different. It works a lot of the time, but there's sometimes it's like, man, that was really abrupt. Like that was really a huge shift. And I don't know how I feel about this.
Maybe it's just the volume. Like it's so loud too when it comes on.
It was loud. Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, when you like look at it and it cuts off, you're like, okay, well, I get they were building kind of excitement and, this or that.
Right.
But when it first like shows him, it's like, what? Like, this is weird. This isn't Rocky.
Yeah. So if you don't know what we're talking about, just watch that last scene and listen for the drums and how loud they come in. And
yeah, watch like the last 30 seconds of episode 2.
Yeah. Okay. Episode 3. Let's talk about flashbacks 7 and 8. This is where Casa enters into the wreckage, the ship that's fallen. Everyone seems to be dead. Everybody seems to be greened or greenish, have a greenish tint to them.
He sees his reflection for the first time, which was interesting.
Well, I thought that too, but then I'm like, okay, so he's never looked in the water.
Maybe it's very green or brown water. Well, not every lake is clean, man, or every river.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably that, but it's probably also an extension of, okay, here I am, I'm all alone, I'm scared, and look at me, I'm not a warrior kind of thing, and or maybe I am, and I don't know. I get. All right, I'll go with the fact that he's never seen his reflection, but yeah, okay, yeah. So he pulls a Kylo Ren, starts smashing the controls everywhere.
It does,
and then Marva and Clem. So this is where we're introduced to Clem, who unfortunately I believe I'm assuming this is the father that gets hung on Rick's Road or whatever it is.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Yeah,
which is kind of sad. So I think we're gonna see that, or they'll at some point, or maybe we'll not see the actual hanging, but we may get that storyline now. But very cool that his, father and mother were adoptive parents. I like that storyline there.
Wait, are they adoptive?
They said they were there for I'm sorry, what?
This is like adopting a kitten across the street when you really go and steal it.
Yeah.
It's more of a gotcha day than an adoption day.
Well, and I think she makes a good point. Like, normally I'd be against child abduction unless, I'm a Jedi, but I can see her point because she says, hey, he's a kid. The Republic fleet is on the way and he's got all these darts. He's got a blowgun, right? They're going to put two and two together. And even if they don't, they're probably going to shoot first, ask questions later again. So either we leave him here, he's going to die.
They could have just pushed him out the thing and said, go home.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know. Maybe it was a matter of time. We don't know how far he went into the ship either. So
yeah, I guess
it sounded like the Republic ship was like imminent. So, but yeah. So I mean, it makes sense for me in terms of why they decided to kind of snatch him up and take him. They said they were there for the console unit. Again, I don't want. We probably won't get into. Well, I think we will. I think you're right. I think we will find out what they do and why they're so. Are they salvagers or scavengers or whatever?
Right.
I think we'll find that out. But they were there for something very specific. I'm curious as to how they knew that ship was there.
Yeah, exactly.
Were they following it? Were they?
Yeah, who shot it down in the first place? Because if it was shot down, you would.
What did it show? Well, okay, so I didn't see a blaster bolt. I need to go back and watch it again, but it looks like it's just coming in. I mean, it was
already on fire. Yeah.
Yes.
Was it? Fair enough. Was it shot down? What actually caused it to crash? Because it was definitely on fire. And if it was shot down, you would have thought that somebody else would have
followed it
and following it in pretty quick.
Right. Make sure that it was completely done for.
Right. Especially if it was a bit of a research type of ship, which it kind of seemed like maybe it was, that it seemed like the way that they were dressed seemed to be more supportive of some sort of research, but who knows? Especially with this gas.
I like the more we talk about this whole.
You and I make everything sound great, Albert. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, seriously, I really like this idea. Like it's very Lost to me.
Oh boy.
And I mean that in Lost as in the show at Lost.
All right, well, I'm out.
It's a mystery box. Okay. Well, let's see. We get back to Jonesy's left. We get back to the salvage yards, and this is where Cassian tells Brasso that he's leaving, that he's going to pay him back. He says he'll return, which I don't understand why he would return at this point.
Everybody has to make a promise. I'll be back. I promise. I'll be back.
Yeah.
I promise.
False promises.
Yeah, right. I won't forget this. Yeah, you will.
Did you see Luthen's walking stick? And the fact that did you see the way he retracts it like a lightsaber? That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's about as close as we're going to get, I guess.
You want to do an analysis on it?
Lightsabers. We need to do. We'll do
I thought you meant
full-blown
walking
episodes.
sticks.
Yep.
Walking sticks of Star Wars.
And there's a couple things here. Like there's a number of things that are happening. In the atmosphere, we got the security guards arriving. The ship's deployed. They jump off. There's that comment that one of the workers says that I haven't seen any blues here in a while. So,
right.
Indicator that they really don't spend a lot of time on this planet. And it's a very, very infrequent that they do show up and see them. And then we got Karn and Mosk heading to the Andor house and with the warrant for Cassian. And this is where Cassian tries to communicate with B, which gives away, his location, right? They're able to kind of, I don't know, Star Wars magic, Star Wars science, triangulate the signal. And they know exactly where he is to the building. But
right. I mean, and we get that way later with Luthor. You have a communicator on you?
Yeah.
And he destroys it by stepping on it because that's what you do.
They do that a lot in this episode. They do it like 3 times.
It's important to step on things.
Step on communicators. Okay, let's talk about the Reckoning Part 1. And again, more the pacing of this from here on out is like pretty quick.
Yeah.
And they're jumping back and forth, and credit to them because it's pretty easy to follow. But if you think about it, they're really jumping around to a lot of different stories and threads that have been laid out in the first 2 episodes, which is why I keep saying this 3rd episode is just brilliant because it just pulls it all together. We got the crowd starting to form, right? They leave 2 guards back with Marva. Systematically, people are going around banging on those drums. Later on, I think it's Mosk who says that they're doing that for intimidation. What was the word he used? Bluff and bluster.
Yeah. I mean, clearly it's a great alarm system. And again, this is the idea that the whole town bands together when there's when you take care of your own, even if you don't necessarily like them, everybody buckles down, everybody does it, everybody takes care of themselves. And again, this goes back to what we learned, with the security console people of they have a different way of behaving down there, a different way of taking care of things. So
Yep.
this is what you're going to get. They may not rise and resist against you, but you're going to have a really difficult time making any penetration out there.
Bix gives herself away. Everybody, and it's a good point. Like it's very nuanced, but everyone is just running right in general and away from wherever these guys are. She's the only one that, when sees them, is startled because and that officer's intuition knows to stop her, because why else would she stop and go the other way, right? She's got to be holding something. So it's she gets captured. I love the way Mosk is like commanding everything. He's trying to get the situation under control. He knows what's about to happen, that this thing could go really south really fast. He stays pretty calm and collected too, which I thought was awesome.
Right, and the inexperience of the team starts taking over, right? Especially once they are attacked, when Cassian and Luthen are meeting up.
Yep. There's the one guard that gets sent to one of the drop ships. Which I want to ask you about that here in a little bit.
Okay.
And then this is where Tim comes. He gets shot, which was, I don't know, what a dummy. Like, they told him to stand down, but I get it, right? I mean, that's his girlfriend or his love, and she's hurt. He's trying to be valiant, be the hero, and yeah, he dies. Yeah,
the heroes usually die. Yep. Albert's watched enough Titanic to know how this ends.
Jack dies. Hate to spoil it.
I'll never let go, Rose.
All right, so we'll come back to the reckoning piece of it, but now I want to cut over again. All this is kind of happening simultaneously. However, I think it's probably best that we just kind of talk about the.
Sure.
I don't know what this still was. I still don't know what this was. Machine room, abandoned warehouse with crazy chains and heavy equipment. What was this?
I have no idea. Yeah, some sort of manufacturing type of place or something like that. I don't know.
It doesn't matter.
We'll just call it a warehouse. How about that?
It's an OSHA nightmare. How about that?
That sounds like it's a fair assessment.
Right. Not only do you have these hulking pieces of equipment above your head, but then there's rust everywhere. So tetanus is a real thing.
It's a great place to shoot your blaster, clearly.
So so 40,000, and again, this is the MacGuffin here, right? This box. Because it really, at the end of the day, like Luthen doesn't. I don't even think he ever cared about the box. Really, he was more about getting Cassian.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. But they call it an untraceable star path unit with vector crystals and the seal still intact.
I mean, quite literally, the Imperial seal is on the top intact.
I saw that. It looks pretty cool. I'd like to get a replica of this, but
I guess so. I'm assuming that all that means is that if usually when you pull those, it might trip it, and so it's like a fuse almost. Like once it's fractured or once it's broken, it's not usable or it has some sort of problem with it. So
maybe,
because
he says
that's
so
what
much.
It means. Yeah,
he says as much that what was it? I forget. Luthen makes a comment about it. If it was, then it would be less, or I don't know. It's not wrong. It doesn't matter. It's a MacGuffin at the end of the day.
Right.
But they do shed some light. I think it's Luthen or someone says that it allows them to track every Imperial coordinate for 9 radio parsecs.
That's a big deal. Because you'd be able to see.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, you'd be able to see where ships are coming in and out of a system, basically.
40,000 credits. 10,000. We could almost buy our own ship for that much. Yeah, but who's going to fly, kid? You better could. I'm not such a bad pilot. We don't have to stand here and listen to this.
Wrong show.
Oh. But yeah, so that gives you some context though, right? 10,000 will buy you a ship. He's offering 40 grand for this thing.
I mean, and then he offers another grand just to tell me how you did it. Yeah. Basically, what do you know? This guy's just throwing money around like it's no business. No problem. No worries.
I felt like when these guys were on screen, like this was some of the best dialogue, some of the best acting. They work really well together. Andor really and Skarsgård, or Diego Luna and Skarsgård together. Yeah, they did a really good job. The dialogue is great.
He's always so serious. Skarsgård is. I mean, Diego Luna is too, very intense, but he's just he's always got the stern look on his face. He never softens for the most part. And everything is so matter of fact.
Mm-hmm.
So every time he talks to Andor, it's very much okay, done. Like what now?
Yeah.
So it just comes across, and you just get this intensity between the two of them, and everything Diego Luna does has just got this reverberation of energy around it too. You just feel it resonating off of him. Just yeah, it's great.
We got some insight into what Andor was doing, where he was bribing quartermasters to leave equipment on ships so they wouldn't clear it out before it got salvaged, and then he would take these more valued pieces that were accidentally left on the ships and then go back and resell those types of things. That was his kind of gig.
Right.
Um,
And again, we know he goes in because he just acts like he belongs.
Yeah.
And along with the bribery. So between the two, he gets what he wants and he's able to do it. But again, Luthen believes there's something more to all of that, though.
Mm-hmm. There's a line that Luthen says. He talks about the Imperial Naval Base on Steergard, right? And I can't help but think in the trailer, when you see Cassian Andor standing there, he looks younger. He doesn't have the full beard, right? And he's in that Imperial officer outfit. I'm wondering again if this is another signaling that we're going to see that flashback of him and what he did at Steergard. Be kind of cool if they did that, but we get the whole. We don't need to get into the whole. They're so proud of themselves. We've seen that so many times in the trailer. All I had in here was that it's Palpatine's weakness again being exposed. Luthen though says some things. He says, but they'll think about us soon enough.
Right.
He
knows it's all coming to a head pretty soon.
Right. Signaling that the rebellion, that someone is going to oppose these guys in a big way here very soon.
Right.
But if you look at him when he's talking, I mean, Andor is talking to him, right? But Luthen's like he's really not paying attention to what Andor's saying. Like he's lost in thought and he's thinking about, he's having his own conversation about they'll think this soon enough. And then he says soon enough, they'll have something else to listen to, etc. He just seems like he's super focused on the mission, and the mission being at that moment is, I need Andor. He's a missing piece that we need to get this thing off the ground. They're going to need like the Saw Gerrera at some point. They're going to need the Andor. They're going to need the Mon Mothma of the group, right? He's putting together some kind of a team, whether it's consciously or not.
Right.
He's lost in that whole thought process and really trying to keep his eye on the ball, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
We get the mention of his father being hung. We know that from the trailer. We don't want to get into that. And then he doesn't really care about the box, but he gets into Luthen's rules, which I thought he would keep on going. We only got 2 of those. Never carry anything you don't control was number 1. And then number 2, build your exit on the way in.
Right.
And I thought about that and I'm like, well, then Cassian Andor didn't really do that in Rogue One. But then I thought, well, wait a minute. He probably did. His exit was to scale that wall to get out of there.
Right.
What he wasn't anticipating was this dude to come in with a limp arm.
Right.
Or a bum arm. So I think it holds up. They blow the door. They get out of there, and I'm kind of blowing through this, but the action sequence I thought was great. I think they did a really good job of the shots, and again, more Steadicam work, over the shoulder stuff. There was kind of a sense of danger because that whole place is ridiculously dangerous to begin with.
Right, and Andor clearly wants to go get the box because he feels that that's where the value is at, when really he's the valuable object in all of this.
True. Yeah. I mean, he's thinking 40K is, we're just leaving that behind. Yeah. This guy's like,
right. He's just trying to get off
way
planet.
More than that.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't think money's going to be a problem for him at this point, especially if he's getting funded by Luthen and others.
Not yet, anyway.
Right. Not yet. We get into, before we get into the final sequence, the Reckoning Part 2. So Mosk then pulls everybody together. They know that they're going to have to try to escape. There's kind of only one logical road that they could come down. And so he starts positioning all these folks to kind of be in the, catch them in the crossfire.
He's pretty good tactically. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what I said. I think he's great
totally
in
competent,
every way.
Yeah.
But Andor's one step ahead of him, of course. The lines from Marva Andor here about this is what Reckoning sounds like. You want to stop it, but it just keeps coming. When it stops, that's when you really want to fret. I love that whole piece. And this from here on out, just the way the tension just keeps building slowly. It's the drumming, it's the music, it's the line deliveries, right? There's almost something very cynical about the way Marva delivers these lines. And she almost, she doesn't scare the crap out of these guys, but she has them second guessing themselves. Like, did we really make the right choice? And should we be here right now?
Right. Yeah. She's creeping them out.
Yeah, which is great. And then suddenly, of course, the town gets quiet. and then Luthen and Andor sneak up on Karn, which I was surprised. I did like how he said kill him, and then he said I'll kill him. Do you think he would have actually done that? Do you think Luthen is at that point now where he just, cold blood kind of thing? Because it felt like Andor was hesitant to do it, probably because of what had already happened, right? He's already killed 2 officers and second guessing himself. But man, Luthen like fires off immediately and says, just kill him. And if you don't kill him, I'll do it. He says, I'll kill him.
Yeah, with Cassian Andor, I think it's very much he's still, this isn't what you're not supposed to do this. So why would he? He doesn't have a reason to. At least the other one was justified. He was trying to protect himself. I think from Luthen Rail's perspective, though, him telling him to do it makes a lot of sense because Luthen cannot be identified, right? Especially if he is in a very senior or prominent position within the Empire, or at least in the former Republic, or whatever that might be. If he is a wealthy person, he can't be visually identified or any way tied to any of this. Otherwise, everything starts falling apart.
True.
Right? Especially if he's more of this militaristic arm of what Mon Mothma is comfortable with doing at this point. And so he has to make those decisions and and again, he's been in this for a while, it certainly sounds like. And so he understands that sometimes you have to make a call. Would you rather it be this way? Probably not, but this is reality. And if you're not going to do it, and again, I think he's trying to test Andor as well, saying, will you do what needs to be done? And he's already starting to train Cassian in order to think that way and actually behave that way as well. And so while I don't think it's manipulative or anything, I think it's just more about training. This is the reality of what we do. And you may not know it, but you're now part of the team. Grats, bro.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think about what would Saul do?
Oh, gosh.
Right.
Saul wouldn't have even asked the first question.
It wouldn't even, he would have just walked up and shot him.
Anything. Yeah.
Yep. And and to me, I think Luthen, even though I believe that he would if he had to, there's still something more, there's still a moral compass to Luthen as opposed to somebody like Saul Guerrera.
Maybe. We'll have to see. We'll have to see what that interaction. Yeah, we'll have to see what that interaction looks like when they get together.
Right.
Because there's certainly some suggestions that they are much more aligned and understand what has to be done to move things and progress things than maybe what we saw here with him and Andor.
I guess the question that, the question that bugs me is just why did they not kill him? Like, I get it would have been cold blood, but they can't be captured. They got the information they needed from him, but they decided to tie him up, and you can just chalk it up to plot armor at the end of the day, right? But
sure, but I think some of it is also Andor probably made that decision, and Luthen may have decided that, okay, he didn't see me. He may have heard my voice,
okay, I get what you're saying.
But he didn't see me.
Yeah.
And we need to move. Let's get out of here and let's do this away. And Andor probably took care of everything. And he went out there and secured the speeder.
Okay. I said, okay, fine. Get off my back.
No, we're going to talk about this for 20 more minutes.
The drop ship. So was that the workers? Like, is this
Brass.
part of that whole,
This is what Brass was doing. Brass walked away from that ship and he was like taking his gloves off.
Brasso, is that what? Or Brasso
is the one that did this.
Oh, I didn't catch that. I must have missed that.
Yeah, so he was just walking away from the ship, and you're like, okay, what'd you do? And then the dude comes up there, and then you kind of see the line trailing back. But yeah, Brasso did it. Now, again, you talk about plot armor. I mean, this is kind of that with why would this be the one ship that would have made the difference? But whatever, it did. But again, Brasso kind of looking out for his own. He knows Andor's in over his head yet again.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you do with your best friend? You do what you can.
Right.
Of what you're capable of. Yeah, whatever that might be. And this was his one way of being able to do something. And hey, no harm, no foul. I just secured it. That's all I did. Just make sure it was nice and safe.
He's a dummy that decided to fly off with a chain, not me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, why would you do that?
And you make a good point, though, because this would have been a game changer. Had they had some kind of aerial presence, they would have easily been able to chase him down on that speeder bike and shot him from the air. But they didn't.
I gotta be honest, man. Those things were a dump. Those things were those dropships were, man. They were relics. They reminded me a lot of Force Awakens, right? When at the very intro sequence with the stormtroopers and the lights flashing and everybody's holding on, and we've seen a variety of this too with Clone Wars and everything else. But it was just very. You talk about bare bones. I mean, there was nothing in there. It was very much. like what you would see, like if you were to watch the military and doing parachuting and stuff out of the back of a plane and of what they would do for dropping. And yeah, it is very bare bones and very dilapidated is about the best word I can come up with.
They're all right. Let's talk quickly about the first official curse word, swear word. I'm not going to say it. We're not going to say it on the show. But the only thing I would say is I thought it was fine. Like even when he said it, to be honest, I didn't really catch it. I mean,
It didn't
I
resonate
heard
with
him.
me either. And part of that's I think because we hear that word so often in Marvel now that I
That's
didn't
true.
even think about it. They use this
Well,
word a lot in Marvel.
that's true, and I probably subconsciously that was part of why it didn't phase me. Where I was coming from was the way that he delivers the line because of how intense things were.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking it in my head because he follows up with
That's what I
"We're
would
under
have said.
siege. They're everywhere."
Yeah.
Right?
It's that expletive realization of that you are screwed, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't. I mean, there's people already talking about how, again, whether
It
lingo
wasn't,
should exist in Star Wars versus it should it not.
gosh, but I mean, it wasn't like he dropped an F-bomb,
Yeah.
or something
Right.
like that. Yeah, whatever, folks.
Well, I guess what I would say is I didn't bother me. There's a I've always felt like cursing is such a it's a skill, and it's very easy for anybody just to curse and say words and drop F bombs and S bomb whatever all day long and I know those people and sometimes I hate talking to them. Okay, but there are people who wield these words eloquently, and there are people that I guess when they say it, it's appropriate. It almost feels appropriate. That sounds weird and counterintuitive, but I guess
I get what
you
you're
may
saying.
know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, again, it's that, especially these moments of like disbelief or where you have that moment of realization that things are a lot worse than you realize, and that's just what comes out.
Well, and if it doesn't come out, we say it in our heads.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think most people, if they were honest with themselves, probably had this kind of moment like, well, darn,
Yeah.
this wasn't what I meant.
Right.
But I think we're a bit, I was a bit numb to it. I recognized it, but I was like, huh. And I immediately thought, I was like, I've heard them say this tons of times in Marvel, and we don't really ever, I don't follow the fandom of Marvel all that closely. Like, and I love Marvel, but I don't follow that level of it.
Right.
To know if this was ever an issue. It may have been at some point. Maybe when Captain America first used a swear word, maybe that was a big deal. But they say things like this a lot. So
Well, I mean, think about the Avengers when he says it. Remember, they're like, language. I think it's Iron Man that says that to him.
Right.
Because he cursed. All right, enough of that.
Anyway, yeah.
We don't need to talk. The action sequence I think is great. The decoy, the getaway, and then Luthen blowing everything up at the very end with the explosives, taking out some of the security officers. Very faintly, you can hear somebody scream "Bacta," calling for Bacta, which I thought was kind of neat. And of course, they get away. So they get away. They head out there, and then we get into the official final sequence here. And there's really not anything being said, which I think is very powerful. But the music is incredible here. It just continues to grow. It swells by the very end.
Right.
It starts off very subtle and then it starts to kind of build. But we got Marva and Clem. They're walking out with Casa. B's kind of following behind them. He's got the parts. Marva's crying back in the present tense. And I wonder if she just is thinking like, I'm never going to see him again. Like this boy that I rescued, I knew this time would come, right? What was it? B says that whole line about, hanging out with people that, or you had the line, whatever it was earlier, right? But this is it. This is the moment that she was prophesizing that this would eventually come and that he was going to do something like this. And I think she's thinking, I may never see him again, but she's crying. Bix is in shock. She finally is uncuffed and they kind of pull her away so she can't get to Tim. Blasso is interesting. I love the way the camera like pulls in tight on his face while he's sitting there.
Right.
I just wonder if we're going to see him again or anymore at this point either.
Yeah, I don't know if we're coming back to this planet or not. Well,
Yep.
well, assuming we will, because Bix will probably resurface at some point. But yeah, unclear. Blasto is kind of a cool character, though. I
I
kind
like
of
him, yeah.
I kind of like him. Yeah,
I hope we do see more of him. But really, this whole and there's more. I'll keep going, but this whole sequence is just really kind of dealing with the aftermath of a lot of different things, right? We're seeing the final moments of all of this kind of these different threads and stories that have been kind of laid out in the first two episodes, and even in this third episode. We've got Mosk, who's trying to pull everybody together. He's screaming, "Sir, we need to get out of here!" Right? Because they're under siege, and I've got questions about what's going to happen with them here a little bit. And then Karn is just standing there, like it's the aliens lieutenant all over again, right? He's just shocked. He's dumbfounded. He's beside himself. He's got to be thinking, "Holy crap, this went absolutely horribly wrong. I thought I did everything by the book and was not, second guessing a lot of things at that point."
Right.
Andor is being shocked by the quality of the ship. We see that a few times. He keeps stopping and looking like, "Holy wow, this is really nice." You got Casa walking up and looking into the sun. You've got Andor staring into the sun at the very end, which I thought was very cool, the way he shot that. And he being, was it Toby, or is it Toby Haynes?
Yeah, Toby Haynes. Yep.
But yeah, I like the way the last shot is, both of them looking in the sun. Then we cut over to Marva in the past tense, turning around, looking. And when they cut over, they don't show the young Cassian; they show the present tense Cassian. And so it's kind of like the symbolism of his whole life is about to change again.
Right.
The moment he left with them originally in the past, now this is a new chapter in his life, leaving with Luthen, which was really great. So
yeah, he's
that's
looking
kind of
forward. He's looking forward to the future as a kid, what the next stage is. She's looking back at Cassian, and then the older Cassian looking forward again, like you said, totally new stage of his life about to take place. So what's coming next for him?
I've seen these episodes 3 times each. One was just to take notes, but I've seen them all 3 times each. But I've seen the last 20 minutes at least 4 or 5 times. Like I've just watched the very ending of it because it's just that good.
Yeah, it was really good.
It's awesome.
Well, again, this episode really did a great job of pulling everything together, but still in a very subtle kind of way, to where when you end, you're like, huh, they really did a really masterful job of actually bringing everything together. Because when I wanted to ask you about this tonight, about how did they handle flashbacks in your opinion, compared to where we kind of forecast maybe how they would do, or we were trying to speculate how they were going to do this. Were they going to do this in more of a Mandalorian kind of way? Were they going to do it in a very linear way? And they kind of ended up going more the Boba Fett route of sorts. But I think they took the Boba Fett route, but actually married it up really well, and actually brought them to more of a natural, intersection point, even though they're still very far apart timing wise. They don't actually touch each other in that way, or they don't combine that way.
Yeah.
But I thought they did a really nice job of that. That Book of Boba Fett fell a little short at in that regard, where we had a difficult concept of time. This one didn't bother with any of that. It just said, here's our stories, but these really do tie in really nicely together. But what'd you kind of think about how they did this flashback type of thing? Not telling us when we were and that kind of stuff altogether, but just in general, did it work better for you than what we've seen in other content, or was there still some room for improvement here?
I really, honestly, if you think about the way they did it, it's so unconventional. Like they didn't even stick with a certain way. Because you think about the very first flashback, that was B saying Cassian, and they transitioned the audio to say Cass, and then they cut over to Kiri saying Cass. And then later on, there was no transition. Like we were in the middle of the present day, and then boom, it was a hard cut directly into a flashback. And so from that regard, it was very unconventional. It wasn't one way or the other. It was a combination of both and kind of just thrown around. But it worked. Like mysteriously, weirdly, it just worked, and it didn't bother me. And I think this is when Mike and I first had these conversations about flashbacks and whether or not was this Star Wars. I mean, it's just been slowly kind of becoming part of the DNA, right? And I think this is just now what we expect. So something like this, to see it so I wouldn't say unorthodox, it seems very extreme, but see it done in a couple different ways in a particular series within just 3 episodes. I don't know, it didn't faze me, and I think it worked really well.
The one key difference about this one compared to all the other flashbacks we've had in the TV series, or at least live action TV series and movies, is this wasn't a character necessarily recollecting the past. It was very much storytelling in the past. It wasn't Din
Yeah.
Djarin sitting there watching something being molded and things triggering memories. It wasn't Luke Skywalker retelling a story, or Ben Solo or Kylo Ren retelling a story. It wasn't Boba Fett in a bacta tank recalling his memories while in a state of stasis, or in healing and things like that. This was very much, while you could argue maybe there's a little of that when he was dreaming with the Casa.
There was dreaming, and then the blowgun. That was the only one though. But your point's well taken though.
Yeah, but it wasn't really. Yeah, it wasn't truly a flashback. It was more of just a storytelling in the past.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I think that worked actually really well. If we're going to tell the story in the past, it doesn't necessarily have to be a recollection. It can just be, here's that story. There's a couple of things in here you need to pay attention to, and we'll get to it. It doesn't have to necessarily be just through the eyes of Cassian Andor today, and how he views everything from the past. And we're going to get that anyway, because we know Mon Mothma is going to be having her own story without Cassian Andor involved. But so anyway, it was a bit of a clear difference though from how we've done in the past.
Okay, so here's what I'd like to propose, because we're at 2.5 hours, and I know this has been a long
just getting warmed up
for a lot of folks,
yeah.
And we still have a lot of questions here in the show notes that I want to get to. So maybe what we could do is I'll kind of run through the questions, allow this to kind of sink in for people. If you want to comment on some of this stuff immediately, go right ahead. But maybe we table these questions for the Patreon episode, and we couple that with the Star Wars television discussion. We can kind of like do a twofer, right? It's just Patreon. Okay.
You mean it's Patreon?
It's Patreon. It's Patreon. So we can do all kinds of cool stuff like that. Okay. So here are the questions that I have, and I broke these up into the past and the present. So the past, will some of the past events be mentioned? Events mentioned in the flashbacks going forward. Did I screw that up? Will some of the past events be our flashbacks going forward, is what I meant to say.
Possibly.
Yeah. Has Cassian been away from Kiri this entire time?
Probably.
Will he be reunited this season or next? Or ever? Will he ever find her?
That's a really good question. I will go end of the season.
It'd be pretty sad if he never did. I would like it. To me, it feels they need to tidy this thing up.
I'll rephrase that. I hope we don't lose sight of him looking for his sister. Because
I don't think so. Yeah, no, that's a good. I would hope so too. I think
it's easy to get wrapped up in all the other. Yeah, it's easy to get wrapped up in all the other things going on with Luth and Rael now and all of this. We don't want to lose sight of him actually looking for his sister.
Who are Marva and Clem working for? We've talked about that one.
I think we'll get some clarity there, yeah.
What happened to the planet? Was it an accident? Where are the adults? I think those will come up a little bit later. What was Luthen's role pre-Empire?
I think we'll get that too.
I think we'll get that. I mean, from the flashbacks, he's got the hippie long hair. No offense to you going on. So, no, I'm kidding. I think, he shaved his head, transitional type stuff, right? So
when you start losing your hair, you have to do something, Albert.
Oh,
is this why you wear a hat all the time?
No, I have hair. There's pictures. Okay. I've posted it. I know people think I've got, a hat head, but no, I've had my hair. Where Andor and Bix a thing?
Yeah.
Because it matters. Okay, but in the present, where does Luthen take Andor at this point? Is Luthen wanted or on the run in some way?
I think
you're of the opinion that he's not because his face isn't out there, or yeah.
I think Luthen's under the radar of the Empire, but he's definitely taking Andor to some sort of safe house.
Yeah,
something like that.
Okay, lavish, posh, bougie safe house.
I'm guessing probably not.
What will be the outcome of Karn and Mosk's failed attempt to bring Andor in? This is the one I think I'm most excited to see.
This is actually a really good question, yeah, because you figure
because Chief Hyne's going to be pissed.
Yeah, he's going to be not happy. And but I think this is where you get the attention of the Imperials. I think this is where Deidre Merrow starts coming in, Denise Koff's character, and the ISB. I think this is where some things start to matriculate upstream, up to the topper levels here.
Percolate.
No, not percolate. And percolate goes down. You have to matriculate.
Oh, matriculate. Okay.
Yeah.
This is exactly what the chief said not to do.
Right.
And we have the exact reason, because the next question is, are these events, the events that call in the ISB and Dira?
Sure seems like it.
Yep. I mean, this is her call to action now, and the chief's going to be ticked off that now they've got the Imperials all over them, asking a lot of questions, and people's jobs are going to be at risk here.
Well, and these two
Um,
bozos get promoted, of course, probably because they're
well,
the
and
only ones. They're the ones toeing the line. Yeah.
and that's the next question. How will she view the actions of Karn and Mosk versus Chief Hein?
I have a feeling she's gonna view them as low life local security people, but she can manipulate them and use them.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Imperial material.
Yeah, exactly. Where does Bix go from here? Like her
That's a really
her
good
future
question.
seems unclear to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see how that one goes. I mean, clearly going to get synced back up with Luthen and Andor at some point, I would think. But when and where and how is good questions.
Are there more of Luthen's rules to come?
Oh, of course.
Okay. I want there to be at least 10 rules that we get over the course of this next season.
Do you want to put them in stone too?
Yeah. on Mount Sinai. Will Marva and B come back into the present day story?
Yeah, I think so.
And I think so too. I just don't know how to get. And I'll put some thought into this before we come back on Tuesday. I need to really sink my teeth
we need more
into how.
episodes. Well, we need more episodes too. I think to be fair, and some of these things we know can and probably will happen, but how we get there, we're gonna have to have a little bit more information before we get there. We can't speculate all the things, Albert.
Sure, we can.
Oh, we could try. Yeah.
What's left on Ferrix for Andor to come back to?
Bix and Marva and B, I guess.
Yeah, Marva and B.
Well, I guess I mean, he cares about his friends too. But
Blasso.
Yeah,
Brasso.
right. Yeah, but I guess it's really Bix though, because he was willing to leave Marvin as long as she had money, could turn the heat on every once in a while.
Turn the heat on.
I like that. So one thing we didn't really talk about, I like that Andor has I guess we did talk about it a little bit. I like that he has oh man, he gets along with droids and seems to like getting along with droids. Sets up the whole K2SO thing later on.
Yeah. Yep. All right. And the final question.
Don't say the word.
I won't say the word, but who the heck is Willie?
He's just a friendly old propulsion salesman making his way through the universe, galaxy, wherever.
All right.
He's really Obi-Wan Kenobi's handler. You just don't know it.
That'd be interesting.
It would be.
Well, I challenge you to find a more thorough, comprehensive breakdown, but not to pat ourselves on the back, but good job. It was fun.
This was fun. Again, 3 good episodes. Very, when we heard what we were expecting to get, with 2 very slow, intro episodes with a payoff in 3, and apparently 4 is really, really good, is even better than 3. Mm-hmm. I was really excited. I was really happy how 3 really did tie it up, but it wasn't so, massive and in a very traditional explosive kind of way. While there was action and things like that, it made sense how things came together, and they were in more subtle ways. You were like, yeah, I like that. That works. That works. That makes sense why we did this. It makes sense why we spent so much time here. And again, something that is going to be different for us is that we have to be willing to give the show time to breathe and give it time to tell us all the things it wants us to know. So what's in Tony Gilroy's head that he wants us to know about these characters, and give it that opportunity to do it, because we have the time and we don't have to rush. And that's going to be different for us because we haven't really had this outside of animation. And so it's going to be different for us. We have to just be a little bit patient with it.
And some levels, our show is a microcosm of the first 3 episodes, right? It's like, it's a slow burn.
The problem is it never really gets anywhere, but it does end eventually.
The first 2 hours, don't really make up. Man, that third hour, we really wrapped it all together here. So
that's right, man.
Oh boy.
This is what happens. This is what happens. You start approaching midnight.
Yep.
Things get a little crazy.
Yep. A little weird. All right. Let's do shout outs and get the heck out of here.
Yeah. So again, thank you everyone who participated in the chat. We had a great lively chat for a while. We know it's a long show, but we appreciate everyone coming out. Jonathan,
you're still awake.
You are, and we have a lot of people still with us, so it's fantastic. Jonathan, Steph, Sky, Rob, Lauren, Amanda, Vader's Girl, thank you for showing up tonight. Katya and David, thank y'all so much. I hope I didn't miss anybody. If I did, my sincerest apologies. It was not intentional. And we hope to see you next week for the Patreon show. Again, we do the Patreon show live on the YouTubes, cantinacast.com/YouTube. Subscribe there. You will be notified. But again, once the show's over, within a few hours, we put that in the vault. So you have to have a unique link to get back to it. So I encourage you to come out, participate in the live chat with us. And of course, we'll be back next Thursday to talk about episode 4 of Andor, which
Mhm.
again is supposedly going to knock our galactic socks off. So we shall see.
I see what you did there.
Do you? Yeah.
And Tuesday again, State of Star Wars, and we'll talk a little bit more, maybe wax some theory and speculation in more depth about the final questions here, and we may even come up with some more. And if you've got some, please bring them on Tuesday as well.
Bring it. Yeah. Hey, find us on Discord, cantinacast.com/Discord.
Cool. All right. Well, that's it. We'll see you guys Tuesday. Get some rest. You're gonna need it. We're gonna need it. And yeah, see you in a few days.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.